the record. What'd you say?
So we'll begin our ceremonies tonight, and welcome to our graduation ceremony for our 2019 Delaware Citizens Academy class. We're going to introduce the class in a little bit. Before we do that, I wanted to offer some thank yous first to City Council for giving us this time tonight to recognize the class, and also for your help with our first session, particularly Mayor Regal, Vice Mayor Schaefer, and Council members Keller and Hellinger for helping out to lead our very first session on our manager council form of government. Also for your support of this class through the last decade and all that it offers for our citizens, and also to our departments. And I say this, I think, every year, but one of the joys that I get is watching our department heads interact in such a way that, or in ways that we don't often get to see them, either here in council chambers or some other way. But when they're with these students, they really do an outstanding job. And to them, I want to say thank you for all of their hard work and their passion for this class. And you really can see it in each session. We began way back in chilly February. And we've gathered every 2 weeks since then to learn about our great city. All combined 20 hours of education for the class of 2019. As I said, the department heads, I'd like to thank our city manager, Tom Homan, finance director, Dean Stelzer, economic development director, Sean Hughes, city attorney, Darren Shulman, city engineer and public works director, Bill Farino, fire chief, John Donahue, utilities director, Blake Jordan, Parks and Natural Resource Director Ted Miller, Police Chief Bruce Pijanowski, Planning Director Dave Efland. They are identified by name, but we had probably close to 30 staff involved with the Academy this year at different departments, and that ranged from supervisors to even our line staff helping out to lead some of the sessions. And they all did a great job, and it's so evident the pride that they take in working for our city and for representing it when they're working with the Academy. And I think our class would probably agree, as impressive as this class is, I think they'd even agree that watching the interaction with our department heads, you've all kind of commented on what a great job they do, and just the, like I said, the pride that they take in the class. Finally, the class of 2019, most importantly, thank you. Thank you for enrolling in the Academy, and I think you all deserve a round of applause for that. I've said this before, I think I said it in my first session, that I don't know if I would sign up for this class. I just don't know. But you guys did, and thank you for all that you do, and for taking part and caring enough about your city to want to commit the last 5 months to learning more about it in ways that you can help it. The class of 2019 was unique. All the wards were represented again, so that wasn't so unique. Their time in Delaware was ranged from less than a year to nearly 50 years. 3 more married couples this year. That's 6 married couples in 2 years. I said last year, I don't know, I think that might be the Valentine's Day start. I don't know, someone looking to get out of a cheap date, so they signed up for the Citizens Academy. Most have stayed together, I believe, over those 2 years. Fingers crossed on this class. But most importantly, and also we had our first add-on this year, a new addition to the class, I think in the second session, and it was very happy to see that it was Vani DiGenova who joined our Citizens Academy class. Finally, the group, what I noticed, and I think they'd agree, they started out as neighbors and they finished up as friends. I think, because we're not all friends with all of our neighbors, right?
Right.
But really, they became friends, and you could see that tonight. And I think you see it in the images that we have on the screen. Just a little bit about the sessions. We continued to get away from PowerPoint as much as we could, and I think that was well received. We did update some coursework wherever possible. We continued to use the class to help us with our comprehensive plan update. Again learned about new technologies over at our utilities department. We learned what a Quint truck does for the fire department. We learned that there's more to a budget than the general fund. We learned that snow plows and mailboxes can get along, but only when they're the right distance apart. And finally, the group already is contributing. We released our survey, and I'm thankful for all the responses that we've gotten back, and just some great ideas that I plan to use beginning with the 2020 class. So thank you for that. I've told you a little bit about the class. Why don't we go ahead and meet them? Madam Mayor, let's
Before you do,
join me out here.
I want to thank you because none of this would ever happen without you, without your coordination.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And to hear all the time in the community what a great guy you are, and it started in this group. So I want to thank you for everything you've done.
Well, it's a good group, and I will defer a little bit of that to the good staff that I get to work with. It really is. They do a great job, and when I can just introduce a department head or a supervisor and go sit in the back of the class and let them go, for the most part, it says a lot about the great staff we have here. But thank you, Mayor. All right, let's come out front and we'll do some diplomas. So let's see if I had any other additions since I started talking. I don't think so. So I'll call your name. You come up and get your diploma. Let's see how we want to do it. We'll do it this week. So let's see. Sandy Mercurio. Rich Mercurio. Lynn Exline. I'll bet this is Rob Exline. What did Kennedy say to Alan Shepard? This award comes from the ground up. Thank you. Ron Waterwash. Alan Brown. Bonnie DiGenova. Betty Deal. Alicia Balone. Brett Latta.
Missed a couple classes, so I gotta make sure this is.
Full credit.
It's okay, Mom, you got full credit. David Rader. Jane Walsh. Betty Schnicke. Thank you. There you go. I'll get it right on the next one. Watch. Les Chinky.
Thank you, Lee.
Lauren Robinson. ceremony, this part of it, congratulations, class of 2019. You did a great job.
Class dismissed?
Well, if they...
Would anybody at council like to say anything?
Yeah, so let's start off that way.
Chris, I think you took Citizens Academy, right?
Many moons ago, yes.
What did it do for you?
A lot of Lee stress, but besides that, it's okay. It was great. I had a great experience with it myself. Ended up here, and it's like Carolyn said, Lee does so much to put it all together, and it's I always say he's a prince among men. So.
Is this how you got this job?
Kinda, yeah.
So proud of all of you for coming and taking the time to learn about our city, and we just look forward to working more with you in the future. You are the eyes and ears now out in the city, so that when you hear people asking questions, you can answer it with informed answers, and let people know sometimes that city government is here to help them. And so just thank you so much for participating in this, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Anybody else?
I just want to say thanks for taking the time to do this. We're all busy. It's a major commitment to decide back in February that you're going to spend all this time learning about our city. So thanks for taking the interest and for being involved.
And I will tell you, we all have your email addresses now, so when we need surveys or boards and commissions, we may reach out to all of you. So thank you all again.
We usually allow, unless Jim or Kyle.
They said that. You have anything?
Either. We usually allow
Absolutely.
new graduates, if you'd like to say anything about the city or those questions that Les didn't ask during the last 5 months.
Anybody have anything?
Well, I'll go for sure.
Okay.
I see the talk way more, I'm sorry, everybody, for putting things in. But not to have some kind of a compliment fest here. I'm new here, and I saw this a year ago in the paper, and I ran into Tom Holman, and I got signed up. I was feeling lucky that I didn't know if you had to apply to this or how you got in. But it's been fantastic. Honestly, I so appreciate what we've gone through, and it was a commitment, but every time, it was one of those, I have to go to that tonight. But once you were there, you were so glad you came. There was no, so it was a very rewarding experience, and I know I'm going to make my wife join, if I can make my wife join. But I am, anyone that mentions it, I think everybody should try to get to this if they can. So, thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say that the passion and dedication from everybody that we met, and Lee is just phenomenal, because it's not easy putting stuff together like this. He was able to move things along, fill in holes. I mean, it was really good. And his passion for this city is just outstanding. But I also think, Mayor Rio, that from the top down, you've got wonderful people working here, and it's just nice to see it, and it has to come from the top down. The customer service is outstanding, and getting to know all these people, the department heads, I can't tell you in the 5 months that I've done this, how many times I've referred to those people and others because of some other projects that I was doing. And the city is getting a great reputation from this because they're realizing that the customer service is here and that we've got this. And it's hard for me now to listen to people complain about our taxes. Like, really? You know, like, to try to be nice, but it's just incredible what you learn. And Lee, I do like the idea of emailing us when you're getting ready to start the next round so we can get our contacts. That was a good thought by whoever submitted that. But I thank the council for all the work because I know that you guys do a lot that nobody realizes, a lot of hours, a lot of commitment. So thank you all.
Thank you.
I can say from a viewpoint of a council person's wife that I see now why he had so much compassion for the city and for the ones who were the head of the departments, because and they just answered every question. We may have thought we were asking a dumb question, but they had the answer. So I know why Joe loved the city so much. And I just want to say thank you for being so kind to me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I stuck up for all you guys at the golf course, when we go to AmVets or Eagles, to eat, and, they complain, why didn't they pick up my garbage yesterday? I had it out there, and the police department, just all the divisions that we learned to know about, I mean, we're right in there with you guys, because they don't know, and we didn't know,
Right.
so.
Well, thank you very much.
And also, I didn't know there was a council meeting tonight. I took somebody's parking place out front. It wasn't yours.
It wasn't mine.
It wasn't yours. But Bonnie said, just park right here.
That
Oh, was it? I'm sorry.
That's all right, they already towed it, I was
That's cute.
I would consider running the course twice a year if there's interest. I don't know how many expressed interest, but.
All right, on that note, we're done.
And anything that'll build, relationship between the city and the government is a good thing, so. Just have to go easy on monorail jokes.
Okay, all right.
Tell them that, joke you told me about, playing
So
the
there's the
golf
mayor,
course
a
with the
council
green.
member, and the city manager walked into a bar. No.
No, that was a different one. What about you playing, and the greens were so fast?
No, it's okay, we'll save that one.
You say that one? I'll tell you. The greens were so fast, you had to hover above the ball with the putter and hit it with a shadow.
He's here all week, folks. Shall we adjourn for our photo? Anybody else for the good of the order?
I got another question.
No.
Too late. We're good.
We'll
Thank you
go
very
on the
much.
steps, we'll take our class photo.
Thank you
all
again.
very much.
Congratulations.
You can bring everything with you, and if you'd like to come back in for the council meeting, you're more than welcome to.
Okay.
How else are we going to talk for 10 minutes?
Let's do our own executive session.
For 10 minutes? Huh?
Unless everybody read Darren.
Well, I read it, but yeah.
What do you think? Did you change it?
Can I borrow your blue pen? I don't want your orange one.
What did you think of it?
There it goes. Got me smarter than the pen. It's a noisy pen.
I mean, I can see well enough like across people. I get the
That's always nice. You can see it, that's kind of disconcerting. It's weird.
No.
That's right, you're like, told me to work for a few hours a day, but today I wore them to the office. And they're actually
I cannot believe I'm here.
Can't be what?
I came.
I mean, for me, any adjustment is pretty big.
I haven't been sick today.
How are you, buddy?
Just cover your corn, your pupil.
So are the Rocky to finish it off tonight?
It feels like you got rocks in your mouth. So I mean, they're very uncomfortable. That's why you just wear them a few hours a day. And actually, they're pretty comfortable now, but the vision is
Really?
part of the problem is that these are progressive glasses.
Mr. Brown is going to ask council
He's playing tonight, isn't he?
for it to the 24th, and then they'll take a vote to decide if they're going to defer it.
Hey, you asked if we could delay it, so I said, we're not gonna do it tomorrow. Okay, not a no.
That's true.
Full disclosure, I'm gonna vote yes, but I'm not gonna be here on the 24th, so.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to get out of it.
I hear you on that.
Out of the country, on vacation, so. Caribbean. Cruising.
There's a lot of free agents coming in.
Eating. All you do is eat. Midnight, we got a buffet.
Right, right. I'm one of them.
The big pants.
Except I'm gonna watch Slow tonight. What?
The ocean down there's made the water.
I think so. I'm better.
The,
I'm just tired. I didn't sleep very well. But I haven't been sick since yesterday. I didn't want to miss a meeting. It's kind of a lot of big stuff. So, I turned a corner at about noon. I saw your pictures from your honor flight. That was amazing. That's got to be so rewarding.
I guess it's because it's so sharp.
It's funny, I wasn't near as tired yesterday as I am today.
Really?
I'm just like, I just want to take a nap. It's the only way.
It's a long day.
It is. I get up at 2:30 and I got back to bed about, I got home 11:30. So it's
Oh, wow.
probably 12:30 by the time I unwound. And
That's a lot.
it's a long day.
Yes.
Somewhere else.
And you don't eat. Time is 7 o'clock, and we'll call to order the city council meeting for June 10th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Browning?
Here.
Mr. Rohr?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here. Tonight's invocation will be given by Reverend Adam Anderson of Old Stoughton Presbyterian Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll all please stand.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all the gifts that you give us. We thank you for the gifts of creativity, for intelligence, for deliberation, and for the ability for people to come together and make good and thoughtful decisions for many. So, gracious God, we thank you for all of those who are here. May they continue to seek wisdom and guidance, not turn themselves over to perhaps ambition or greed, but instead continue to seek the will of the people. Thank you again for all of these institutions that you have given us the gift to use and use well. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend Anderson. Item 4 is the approval of motion summary of the regular meeting of council held May 13th, 2019, as recorded and transcribed. What is the wish of council?
Move for approval of motion summary.
Second?
I have a motion by Mr. Browning, a second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Abstain.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Acceptance of the motion summary of the Planning Commission meeting held on May 1st, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. Item B, acceptance of the motion summary of the Civil Service Commission meeting held on May 1st, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. Item C, acceptance of the motion summary of the Finance Committee meeting held on January 23rd, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. Item D, acceptance of the motion summary of the Airport Commission meeting held on October 18, 2018 as recorded and transcribed. Item E, acceptance of the motion summaries of the Historic Preservation Commission meetings held on January 23, 2019 and February 27, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. Item F, establish June 24, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. as a date and time for a public hearing and second reading for ordinance number 19-35, an ordinance approving a conditional use permit for the Ohio Wesleyan Village student housing located at the northwest corner of Liberty Street and Park Avenue on approximately 3-acre zone POI planned office institutional district, and ordinance number 19-37, an ordinance for approval of an alley vacation request by Ohio Wesleyan University of an alley for Ohio Wesleyan Village student housing located along the north side of Park Avenue just west of Liberty.
Thank you very much.
Move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is time set aside for letters, petitions, or public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Travis Urban from the Delaware General Health District. Just wanted to share some news that our agency recently finished an age-friendly assessment for Delaware County. We partnered with SourcePoint and we surveyed over 700 people aged 55 plus throughout the county on a variety of topics such as outdoor spaces and buildings, transportation, housing, civic engagement, health services. So I want to share with you a report on here. The report has contact information for questions if you guys had any, but if you have any questions now, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Any questions?
Leave this report with you. You read it. It's a good read.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on. Oops, I'm sorry.
Good evening, all. Adam Anderson, 45 Park Avenue, not only a pastor, but a resident of the area. So I'm proudly a member of the Thumb of the 2nd Ward. Wanted to first off say thank you. I've been here a year now. I want to express my thanks of being a member of this community. Especially, I'm thankful to be a member of the 2nd Ward, an incredibly diverse area in consideration of Delaware, Ohio, both socioeconomically as well as racially, and that's a real gift. To be able to celebrate with my neighbors as we are able to work on building community together. In light of that, I wanted to express some concerns that I had, in particular, in light of the unfortunate accident that occurred last week of Michael Tighe, who unfortunately passed away in a automobile accident. A cycling accident. I live just like a block away from where the bike path crosses Sandusky. And I would say it feels far more like a game of chicken, especially with my 5-year-old and 3-year-old, than I think any community should tolerate. It happens on a regular occasion that I cannot expect any of the cars on Sandusky to slow down. And moreover, I might be able to expect one car in one lane to slow down, but have no expectation of the people on the second lane. That obviously is a deep concern, and especially in light of having an accident like Mr. Tighe, that often comes into mind of what happens when you get things other than vehicles into the street. And so obviously, I'm sure this is something that council is aware of. I'm sure planning and others are made aware of. But I just want to express that as a concern, again, because as a father of a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, it obviously is disconcerting. To add, I also often see that at the intersection, at the main intersection there, right here, where I have to see cars making very quick and rapid turns, not having much concern about the pedestrians. But I would love for whomever could take a serious look at how to encourage individuals to slow down so that people can cross safely over that crossway. I think it would go a long way, especially because I do think it's trafficked more than perhaps is considered. So just wanted to say again, thank you for allowing me to pray today, and thank you for, of course, being part of this community, and I'll yield the balance of my time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Riggle, perhaps that could be referred to parking and safety?
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Chief.
Mayor, if I just provide a quick update too to the gentleman. We just were talking about this particular intersection last week, and we do have in our annual budget $25,000 for these types of improvements, and we're looking right now at can we make an improvement at that crossing of Bernard Sandusky Street on the bikeway with that amount of funding, upgrading it to like an RRFB crossing similar to what you see at the Liberty Road Obu crossing. That's in the works right now.
And people say government doesn't work fast. Look at that.
We'll also say legislatively, it's not really well known, but as a pedestrian, you have to be in the lane of travel before you have the right of way. So I've been working with Senator Brenner's office. He's actually introduced Senate Bill 73 this year, which is hopefully will be a successful piece of legislation, which will change the state law to have the state become a must stop while a pedestrian is at the curb, not while a pedestrian is in the lane of travel. So that's in the works. And the problem is if you implemented a change like that on a city by city basis, it's different everywhere. So if we can get it done in the state, it's the same everywhere. We can do some training, do some education. So I'm hopeful. It's been about 2 years in the making.
Thank you. Yes.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Jeff Robinson, and I am a resident of the city, but here this evening as a member of the board of the Common Ground Free Store, and have members of our board and development committee with me here this evening. And with the quick action on that last one, I'm tempted to just ask for money for the free store to see what happens.
I knew you would.
But I'm here this evening to talk about our annual fundraiser. It's called Fashions and Fixins. It's coming up in August. And we have promoted the event annually in the city. Lee has been kind enough to have us on his radio show to promote it, but we have never come to a city council meeting to officially invite our council members to this event, which is a wonderful fundraiser. This year it will be August the 24th, a Saturday night, at the Homestead of Radnor. And if you are, I'm sure, familiar with the Free Store and the location of the Free Store, but you may not know what goes on there on a day-to-day basis, and perhaps the best way to find that out without actually being in the store is to come to this event and just hear a little bit about what the store does, the people that it helps in the community, the need for the store in the community. But that's why we're here, is just to extend an invitation for you to come and see a little bit more about it, have a great evening, a great dinner, and support a great community organization. So that's it. Thank you. Anything? Did I miss anything?
Jeff, I went last year and it was a really nice time.
It is at 7, is that right? 6. At 7, if you're farther out in the Atlantic Ocean, 6 Eastern time.
You could email Elaine, she'll send it to all of us.
We will do that, yes, we will do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay. We'll move on to committee reports. Mr. Jones?
I have nothing, Mayor.
Mrs. Keller?
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Browning?
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Rohr?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Hollinger?
I have nothing.
Mr. Schaefer?
I have something.
Good.
Health and Safety meets next Monday, the 17th at 6 o'clock.
Okay. We did have planning commission last week and everything went really nice. We had one case and in and out, and that was strange. Okay, we'll move on to presentations. Is Lindsay or Jessica here? Okay. If you will come forward, please. I'll be trying. Get my back up. I have a proclamation for you. I'm going to try to do better than I did last year.
Do you want to come up with you?
Sure. Lynn Hesley, don't take offense. You know, family members, it's very difficult. Whereas the City of Delaware has a responsibility to recognize occasions of outstanding significance, and whereas June 2019 is Brain and Alzheimer's Awareness Month, recognize a disease that affects 5.8 million Americans, 220,000 Ohioans, and whereas recognizing these events provide an opportunity to promote and to join the global conversation about the brain and Alzheimer's disease as public health crisis. Whereas with no known way to slow or prevent Alzheimer's disease, essential public health service of early detection, risk reduction, and surveillance are necessary to protect and improve the health at a population level. Whereas caregiving for individuals with Alzheimer's disease often takes an enormous toll on family members. Caregivers themselves often suffer more stress, depression, and health problems than caregivers of people with other illnesses. Whereas we recognize the important role of the Alzheimer's Association Central Ohio chapter plays in meeting the needs of people affected by Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia through family and clinical support, early detection and diagnosis of this disease, education, advocacy, and research. Now therefore I, Carolyn K. Riddle, the Mayor of the City of Delaware, do hereby proclaim the month of June 2019 as Brain and Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and also proclaim August 10th, 2019 as the Delaware Walk to End Alzheimer's Day in the City of Delaware, and ask the residents to participate in the August 10th, 2019 Delaware Walk to End Alzheimer's Day, and to raise awareness and to take the first steps to a world without Alzheimer's. I did it.
Great.
So much.
Yes, thank you so much.
Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I'll
Please
say a
do.
few
Yeah.
words. Yeah. Those of you that don't know me, I'm Lindsay Collins. I'm the walk director here. In town, we have a local walk to end Alzheimer's. Globally, we have about 600 plus walks around the world. Here in Delaware, the support has been overwhelming the last 3 years that I've been the director. This year, we have a very lofty goal of $100,000. I think we will surpass that tremendously this year. Like she said, it's on August 10th. It's at Ohio Wesleyan University. If you guys all know where the fountain is, which I'm sure you do, that's where you'll see us. Loud music, lots of purple, you cannot miss us.
If any of you guys are interested, we do have an event coming up on Friday at Blended 7 Winery from 7 to 9:30. They're doing an awareness evening for us to spread a little bit more awareness about the disease and the cause here in Delaware County. And they're going to give us a dine and donate percentage back, so we'd love to have your guys' support. If you can't come out on walk day, come have a glass on with us on Friday.
Did you want anything? No.
And this is Jessa, she's my co-chair.
Ironically, August 10th is my father's birthday.
Thank you so much for your support.
No, I don't mind at all. Okay.
Oh, would you have your phone? I'll turn my
Are we doing a selfie here or what?
We'll do it. Thank you. Here, I'll let you hold it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next presentation is Shortcut Alley presentation by Susie Bibler, the Executive Director of Main Street, and Zach Price, who's a board member. If you'll come forward at this time.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. Do you need my name and address for the record? Okay, we're good. That was not an easy presentation to get through. Hugs. Thank you for having Zach and I here tonight. Zach is the Vice President of the Main Street Board and is here tonight. He is also the head of the Design Committee for Main Street, Delaware, and he's also an architect. And he is here tonight with me to present to you a proposal that we have for Shortcut Alley. This project came out of, I guess, years worth of needing attention in that specific area in the downtown, but more recently through the parking study that was done through the city back in 2017. And it was identified as an area that, through the pedestrian experience committee that came out of the parking study, as an area that we could look at to improve for pedestrians in our city. So with that, I will let Zach take over.
Thank you. Again, my name's Zach Price. So Elaine, if you could flip to the next slide. I'm just going to go, this is pretty brief, and Susie covered kind of the background here, but again, the Main Street Design Committee identified this particular alley as a focus area for improvements with paving and lighting, and then some decorative kind of more artistic and components to it. So Elaine, if you could flip the slide again, please. This is the alley as it is currently, with the exception the two pictures on the bottom left were in that alley. They've since been actually cleaned off by a number of Main Street volunteers that came in and spent a day cleaning graffiti off of those brick walls. So they look, most of the graffiti has been removed. You can still see a tiny bit on the right there in that picture. That picture was taken just last week. But as you can see, the alley it's not well lit in the evening. The paving needs a bit of work. It's cracked, and even on a nice day, it'll hold water there, so which turns to ice in the wintertime, and by the end of the summer, it's usually pretty slick with growth there. So this is the area that we're hoping to address with this project. The project itself, the Main Street Design Committee came up with this conceptual design project that includes this series of steel archways in the alley, some lighting, and spaces for rotating art displays. We have different members on the committee representing Preservation Parks, the city, the Health District, the Ross Art Museum, and they've come up with some great ideas and have some identified other partners to help provide, activate this alley as a unique place. So, Elaine, if you could flip one more. So, we came up, this is just the design right here. On the right there is a plan. It's basically to do a brickscape with a concrete border around it. The bricks are similar to what you see on Sandusky Street, although they are pervious, so they allow water to drain through, so that to address the drainage issue. The bottom left a detail 4 there is just a detail of how that works. I've actually used that detail on 100,000 square feet plus of public projects that I've been a part of over the past 10 years, and it's held up great. The arches themselves, there's 2 different types. There's an end cap at the Winter Street side, and then one at the parking lot, which is similar to that drawing on the middle on the top there. It's got a decorative D on it, and this is a sample that we had made by the company that we've spoken with about fabricating these arches. And then in between those 2 ends, there's another series of a little bit more simple design. In between, there's 8 of those there. So, Elaine, if you could flip to the next one, please. This is some images of how that might look when it's completed. Obviously the picture on the left there is just a artistic rendering of the alleyway itself. There will be some bistro type lights similar to what you see on that top right there, and then the other image is just how art might be displayed there. So next slide. And this is our last slide. So essentially what we are asking is for the city's help to help us in funding this project, in particular the paving piece of it, which is less than half of the total amount of the project. The majority of the funding will come through private donations, most of which have been identified so far. And then we would also like to do a community crowd grant type of project, just to raise awareness, get the community excited about it, and kind of rally around this project to kick it off. And then the last piece again would be the paving piece, which we're seeking help with. So that piece itself, my personal past experience on doing the public bid projects for that particular paving work is that piece. My experience is we've been able to bid that for about 15 grand for that, but those typically on non-prevailing wage. We do a lot of that in school districts, so it could be slightly more. And that last pricing was about a year ago, but that's roughly the amount for that piece. And then the other piece, the steel arches, the lighting, and then all of the design work is slightly over $20,000, which most of which has been identified and will be raised by Main Street. So happy to answer any questions about it.
I'm real glad to see that the arches aren't arches this way, they're this way. I was so worried about taking away from the Buns Arch, which is one of the things that we're known for, and I know there's being one looked at the other end for the Strand. And I was just praying you weren't going to do the same type of arches. So thank you very much for taking that into consideration. I like this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just had a question, Zach. You said it was $15,000 for the paving. Is that labor and materials or just materials?
I've done a lot of this exact paving detail. It's typically been larger scale, and usually we do this a lot for school districts, for places where we need paving, but we don't want cars. That's more for service or emergency access, and it's actually come in on a square foot basis quite a bit less than that. But
So did you say
yes.
materials about half of the 15?
Yes.
Is that a local company that supplies that?
I'm sorry?
What company supplies this?
Hamilton Parker supplies the brick.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
Okay, terrific.
Any other questions or comments?
I happened to meet Susie in this alley, we both happened to be in the same place at the same time. And she showed me some of the issues with the alley now, and I think that this is an excellent plan to just not only remediate the issues that are already there, but just make it safer for people to travel in and a lot more attractive.
Maybe they'll actually use that back parking lot more.
Yes.
We can move those dumpsters. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right.
Thank you.
We can't give you the 15,000 that you're asking for right now, even though the last one did. It just doesn't work that quickly
I
usually.
understand.
Nice try, though. Thank you very
Thank
much for the
you.
presentation.
What would be the process for us moving forward with this?
Can I jump in?
You sure
Okay,
can.
so what I would recommend, it seems like there is some consensus here with, on council. I think it would be a good idea for, either Tom or myself to meet with Susie and Zach. We'll get down to the minutia, which we don't wanna bother any of you with. I want to bring Bill in and let's talk about the material, make sure it's appropriate, for our city. And then we can go forward. But what I would like to take back to Tom, since he's not here, is that relatively 30,000 foot level, you guys are all in favor of pursuing and getting some more information. I don't think it'll take too terribly long. It shouldn't anyway. So, I'll just move that way. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And item C is a revised traffic calming guide for the neighborhood streets at Hull Drive.
Yes, okay, thank you. Mayor, the residents of Hull Drive weren't able to attend this evening, so they asked if this could be pushed off to the June 24th meeting.
Okay, can they be notified ahead of time then? So-
They've already been notified.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so.
I have
Thank you.
one question about this. So the revised guide, Bill, was the actual guide changed or only the memo?
The only part of the guide that was changed was removal of the funding. We had a small section about some funding suggestions based on the measured need, and that was removed. We're working with the city manager, and instead language was put in there that any funding the city would provide towards any traffic calming project in the future would be the discretion of city council and availability of funding.
Okay. Would it be okay if we just got an email that says this is the part that was removed and this was the part that was added? Because I had both versions,
I
trying to
can do
figure
that.
out what changed.
Yep.
Just even a page number or something, just to help make sense of that.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Thank you.
All righty. Item 9 on the agenda is consideration of a liquor permit relating to stockholder changes.
Consideration of a liquor permit for the Cazadores Corp. Doing business as El Vaquero at 33 Rotring Street and Patio, Delaware, Ohio 43015, permit classes D5 and D6.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. For consideration is this is actually just a stockholder change. It's a minor partner in the business. No issues with the new stockholder. No issues with the business. Police department recommends approval without requesting a hearing.
All right.
I move for approval of the liquor permit.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elena, if you'll read item 10, which is the 7th reading of ordinance number 10-07. Or, I'm sorry, 19-07, item 10.
Ordinance number 19-07, an ordinance amending chapter 1121 and 1143 of the Planning and Zoning Code of the codified ordinances of the city of Delaware.
Mr. Schulman?
Sorry, bad timing. Madam Mayor, members of council, coming off of the public hearing that we had, I think it was last meeting, but it's been a while since we didn't have we skipped a meeting for Memorial Day. The draft you have has a number of changes that are in yellow. I'm going to walk through them real quick just because it took some time between planning and police and I to work through this, and I just want to explain it to you so you know what I did. First change we made was we made it clear that in our definition of massage that it does not include adult entertainment businesses that are defined elsewhere in our code. And thinking about this further with the safety valve process that we came up with that I'll explain later, we want to make it clear that this wasn't an end around our adult-oriented business zoning. So we just put in there that that's not what this is intended to do. Second change is mostly a change that we had last time about inspections as a possibility if you have a permit. However, I did add a sentence that says if an individual has this license under this section and someone working there does not have the appropriate license, that certificate of zoning occupancy does cease and the person must stop working immediately. Because we talked maybe about some sort of criminal violation. We don't have anything about that yet. So we felt that revoking the certificate of occupancy at least would be a good first step if someone does violate our requirements. Moving down to the next change, this is primarily in response to the testimony we had at our hearing. We heard testimony that there are sorts of massages that are not the type of therapeutic massage that is licensed by the state of Ohio. So we added in a process by which if you have this other type of massage and it doesn't fall under the state of Ohio, they can appeal, not really appeal, they can apply to the city council, present their case, and council can provide some checks to it, and then if they want to approve it, deny it, or add conditions to it. That's the process to go if you are part of the yoga massage that we heard about last time, or any other types of massage that we don't know about. So that does provide, as I call it, like a safety valve or an alternative mechanism for legitimate business to get approval by city council. The final change that we put in there is we put just something in the fee schedule about it. Part of the information we got from Sergeant Rapp when we met with him was that the more steps or requirements that you make people go through to get this thing, it weeds out the bad actors. So we picked a low entry fee, but we thought that might scare off some of the illegitimate businesses as well. So those are the only changes we've made to the ordinance, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Again? Nothing?
I like how it reads.
Sounds like it addresses all of the issues that we had.
I think we get it all there.
Yeah, Darren, I just appreciate all the steps you've gone through to get this right. I know it's been quite a bit of write and rewrite on your part.
I'm happy to do it because it makes, and I'm glad that we had the testimony because I always felt like I just wasn't getting the whole picture, and I think that testimony really helped us get our hands around everything that's out there.
I'll move for approval of ordinance 1907.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries. 7 readings.
Have we ever gone that far in anything?
Oh, yeah.
Searches.
Walmart.
What? Oh,
Probably
Walmart,
Walmart.
yeah. Forgot about that one. Okay, we're at 7:40, oh, 7:34. Sure. All the rest of these go together. Okay, if you want to jump down to 18, the second reading of ordinance number 1933.
Ordinance number 19-33, an ordinance amending the employment agreement with the city manager and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, this ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace property, health, safety, and welfare of the city. The emergency clause is required to enact the changes retroactive to December 26, 2018 without further delay. Therefore, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
So this is just a second reading, it'll come on for third reading at the next
I'm
meeting.
not following what the emergency clause is for.
To allow them to get us retro pay immediately upon passage.
Right,
So it doesn't have to wait.
30 days. We've done that with, most pay agreements that
Okay,
have been
I'm fine
done
with
with an
that.
emergency.
I'm fine.
yeah.
If it's retroactive, though, why do we need an emergency clause here?
Well, because we still would have to wait 30 days to increase his pay.
It would just be a longer a bigger
Yeah.
retroactive period.
Is there a ramification with how it's referendumable?
Yes, so if we were to pass an emergency clause, the citizens could not pass a referendum to undo it, which is one reason why we tend to try to avoid doing emergency clauses. You may recall at our first reading, I did mention that if council is reluctant to have an emergency clause, you can go 3 readings and not have the emergency clause, or you could pass it after 2, but not do an emergency clause, which would kind of keep it from extending out quite as far. That's totally at the purview of council.
I'd probably prefer not to pass it with an emergency clause and take it to 3 readings. It would delay it by 30 days.
Well, it would delay it, I mean, should have been enacted in December. So that would add, so if you take it to a third reading, that would add 2 weeks and then plus another 4, so it'd delay it by 6 weeks.
Why'd you say December?
Because it's retroactive, but back till December.
Because the appointment is back to
Yep.
December.
Yes.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of council, we did make a change, maybe 1 or 2 reviews ago, to line up the city managers with the rest of the pay plans. You may recall, it used to be like February or March,
Right.
but it was just weird, it didn't make sense, so we moved it to hit the end of the year, so we were just a little behind on it.
A little?
Darren, you're saying if we pass it tonight without the emergency clause, then there would still be that 30-day window.
It'd be the 30 days, but you'd save 2 weeks, so it's kind of a middle ground, which is, I recognize.
Referendable too.
It would be referendable, so you
Right.
preserve that aspect, but you save 2 weeks.
Sure.
If
Is
there's
there
any
any-
questions about it, I'm happy to answer anything that you might be
I like Kent's
uncomfortable
idea.
about.
Yeah, Kent's idea works, as long as there's no objection from anyone. Second reading, we didn't have any objection at the first reading.
Well, first, I guess I would ask to have the emergency clause removed from ordinance 19-33.
Is that a motion?
That's my motion.
Second?
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Ms. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 19-33.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 1933 as amended.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion?
May I ask a question, Madam Mayor, because I was talking to
What did you
Dean.
get for not paying attention?
Well, he was asking me a question about the ordinance. Did we adopt an emergency clause or not?
No.
Okay, I'm caught up. I thought I heard the first vote from Councilman Schaefer. I didn't know what it was for, so I do apologize.
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, let's go back to 11. I know it's not till 7:45, but it's 7:39, so read slowly, okay? So you're gonna read 11 and 12 and 13. Yeah, just 11, 12, and 13.
Ordinance number 19-26. An ordinance approving a rezoning amendment for John and Tess Meeker for Meeker's Venue from R4 Medium Density Residential District to R4 PMU. Medium Density Residential District with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and extend the current PMU at 377 East William Street to 385 East William Street on approximately 0.477 acres and located at 385 East William Street. Ordinance number 19-27, an ordinance approving a conditional use permit for John and Tess Meeker, allowing the placement of a PMU, Planned Mixed Use Overlay District, to be established for Meeker's venue on approximately 0.477 acres and located at 385 East William Street. An ordinance number 19-28, an ordinance approving a final development plan for John and Tess Meeker for Meeker's venue on approximately 0.477 acres zoned R4 PMU, medium density residential district with a planned mixed use overlay district and located at 385 East William Street.
Okay, we still have 4 minutes, which means your presentation has to be 4 minutes long.
4 minutes long,
Okay,
okay.
Dave.
Madam Mayor, members of council, these are a series of cases that would amend the zoning for the church out by the point. I'm going to walk through the development plan here for you in summary. The location is right at the point between Foley Street and the point. The zoning is residential, R4 in this case, and that's not unusual for institutional, particularly church uses within most communities and within our community. I will show you and just point out here, the 60 outlined in blue was a small planned mixed-use overlay for the office building immediately to the west of the church property. And so as you'll see, part of the proposal here, as we were talking about it with the Meekers and the applicants, was to simply extend the planned mixed-use overlay across both of these properties and describe each one of them as a separate sub-area. So the property in 60 up here on the map is part of this rezoning, but there are no changes proposed to that sub-area in the text for that particular development that has already gone through the process. Our comprehensive plan does call, not surprisingly, for the church to be an institutional use, assuming that it would be there for quite some time, and it is proposed to be changed. Here's the church and the addition building that was built to the church. This is a historic church area and its parking lot next to Foley Street. There are 96 spaces required for this particular use. 50 are on site and have been on this site for a long, long time. The applicant has done a very good job in trying to work with their surrounding neighbors and even the schools down the street to secure some additional parking. As it turns out, the community member that would work with them in this regard were the city schools down at Conger, and they've provided for you evidence of securing 46 spaces at Conger by agreement. So therefore, they would meet the parking requirements. It's a little ironic here because the church use and all the uses that went on in the church through the years, albeit under institutional auspices, are essentially what this applicant is proposing to do, but for commercial purposes as a wedding venue. They are also seeking to add potentially a single-family residence, which would be there at this particular location as well. So I guess a big live workspace, if you will. So that is sort of phase 2 in the future, but wanted to set the zoning up so that they would have the ability to do that. So the two sub-areas, sub-area A, as I mentioned, is not changing at all, and sub-area B would remain. Foley Street is not proposed for any changes. As you can see here in the aerial photograph, it does appear that some of the parking is within the right-of-way of Foley Street. This does happen in some of the older parts of our community. And we've talked about that internally as staff, and basically we're okay with leaving the situation as it exists today. We talked about abandoning Foley Street, cleaning up the right-of-way, lots of different options. But the one that makes the most sense and has existed for a long, long time is the existing condition as it is today. And the applicants are okay with that. It's an encroachment to our right-of-way technically. So the proposed site plan in this case, as is required under PMUs, is pretty simple. It's the existing site and parking the existing buildings, and they would like to add a privacy fence for as much privacy as you can maybe have between Central Avenue and William Street at the point. But that would give them a little bit of sort of defensible and maybe a little bit quieter outdoor space for their wedding venue. I will say from a staff perspective, from all departments, the Meekers have been wonderful to work with. They're small business owners. They have been in this business for a while, so they do know what they're doing. This is a big project for them, but they have followed all the processes and been very compliant with us as staff and very forthcoming with us, and we appreciate that from the staff perspective. Your Planning Commission did recommend unanimous approval at their May 1st Planning Commission meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I think we are at the time of the
4 minutes
official
and
public
45
hearing.
seconds.
Very nice.
Well done.
Love it when a plan comes together.
I have a couple questions.
Absolutely.
First, I want to say that I was thrilled to death when this project came across our desk, because I drive past there twice a day, every day, and I've always been thinking, what's going to happen with that, with that church? So this is a blessing, especially with all the development we're doing on the east side of town now. I think it's fantastic. But besides that, Bill, my question to you is, with the upcoming, work with the point and anything like this, is it going to affect their property at all? Is there anything that's going to happen in the future that's going to affect them?
I mean, there will be some minor effects. We did sit and
So they're aware of.
we met with
Okay.
them, and as Dave mentioned, they're great to work with, a great project. And what's really good about this project is it's the off-peak nature of their peak traffic to when the point is.
Sure.
So they're comfortable with the improvements. We spoke in detail of what to expect over the next 2 or 3 years out there, and made available ourselves to availability for more questions.
Great,
So,
thanks. Like I said, this is, to me, talk about the entryway to the city. To have something viable there is thank you.
Yeah.
So, that's all I had, Mayor.
Anyone else? All righty, we will open this up to the public. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward? Would the applicant like to come forward first? I should ask them. Do you have anything to add?
I don't think we have anything to add. We're excited about the events and looking forward to moving forward with the process and being part of the community.
Okay. Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. What is the wish of council?
I make a motion to suspend rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1926.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Jones, a second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Make a motion for approval of ordinance 1926.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries.
And move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1927.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move for the approval of ordinance 1927.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries.
I move for the suspension of the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1928.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
And I move for the approval of ordinance 1928.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries. Good luck. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And when you need someone to officiate weddings, I've done 444. Call me.
Not that you're counting, right?
Yes, I am. Okay, let's move on to item 14.
Do you want to do 14 or do you want to do CRA?
14 stands alone, right?
Yes.
Let's do 14. You read item 14 for me? Sure. What?
This one.
14.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's vote.
Ordinance number 19-32, an ordinance accepting the annexation of 100.648 plus or minus acres of land, more or less, description and map are attached hereto as exhibits A and B for the annexation known as the Gurdon LLC annexation by Michael R. Shade, agent for the petitioners.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we did present this at your last meeting. You understand the timing requirements of the Ohio Revised Code that is contained in the agenda and the fact sheet as well. And you have until your first meeting in July to accept the annexation. Of course, you can choose not to accept the annexation. If you don't do anything with this by that first meeting in July by Ohio Revised Code, it's as if it is rejected. And so that, obviously, we have cases coming up this evening and public hearings related to the potential rezoning and development plan for this property as well. So I think we're within our customary practice of trying to have the annexation and the development plans marry up in time so that you can see what the proposal is before you decide on an annexation. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Any comments from Mr. Shade, since he's sitting there looking at me?
Just here to answer any questions you
Okay.
might have. The standard expedited type 2 annexation meets all the requirements.
Any questions? Okay. Okay, now which will be for the next one? Okay, I guess we'll read 15, 16, and 17.
Ordinance number 19-29, an ordinance approving a rezoning amendment for Gurdon LLC for Winterbrook Place from A1 Agricultural District to R3 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district containing 263 single-family lots on approximately 100.6 acres and located on the north side of Peach Blow Road just east of the Belmont Place subdivision. Ordinance number 19-30, an ordinance approving a conditional use permit for Gurdon LLC, allowing the placement of a PMU, planned mixed-use overlay district, to be established for Winterbrook Place containing 263 single-family lots on approximately 100.6 acres and located on the north side of Peach Blow Road, just east of the Belmont Place subdivision. In ordinance number 19-31, an ordinance approving a preliminary development plan for Gurdon LLC for Winterbrook Place containing 263 single-family lots on approximately 100.6 acres zoned R3 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district and located on the north side of Peach Blow Road just east of the Belmont Place subdivision.
Thank you. All right, you have to give a 6-minute presentation.
Yeah, this one's a little more complicated, so it might
Good.
take a little bit longer than that,
Okay,
which
good.
is okay. I just want to run through the basics of this proposal. Obviously, it's a large annexation, significant annexation and development plan proposal that would effectively round out the development in our southeast corner of our community. It is now being titled Winterbrook Place, and these cases are around the zoning of that property, conditional use permit, which will allow the placement of a planned mixed-use overlay, a PMU, and the preliminary development plan required of that zoning. So the property is the 100-acre Gurdon property. It's adjacent to Peach Blow Road, Belmont Place subdivision. A bit of it touches the Ohio Health 100-acre property and the communities at Glen Ross. Property is obviously unzoned in the city of Delaware at this point, as the property is not in the city of Delaware at this point in time, as you know. Our comprehensive plan does call for low-density, single-family development. Our current comprehensive plan, as council is aware, we're also going through an update of our comprehensive plan that will not be ready, obviously, in time for this case, but we're exploring some our alternative uses and mixtures of uses within this greater southeast area of our community. I would point out for you that the proposed density of the development is 2.61 dwelling units per acre. That is low density single family by our standards under zoning, by our community standards, and under the comprehensive plan standards. This is Belmont Place, for example. It has a density of 2.75 dwelling units per acre, and the communities of Glen Ross immediately to the north has a density of 2.31 dwelling units per acre, and so this is right in the middle of those two. The other thing I'd point out to you is that this is contained in our comprehensive plan as being in the Cheshire sub-area. There are two particular land use goals and objectives that are contained within our plan for that sub-area that we think as staff are particularly germane to the development in front of you. That's land use element 23.3 and land use element 23.4. I'll just read parts of it to you just so it's on the record and you hear me read them. But the city supports residential developments with higher valued homes and condominium developments than found in other parts of the city. The city does not support additional entry-level product in this sub-area except in support of adjacent or nearby employment centers. It's the city's clear expectation that residential development in the Glen Road corridor will contain a mix of housing products, but will not be entry-level housing. Creative and imaginative site design techniques will be used. Mixing densities and unit types in support is supported with residential developments, as is the use of small open spaces to create interest and a sense of place within neighborhoods. Neighborhood collectors should incorporate medians and roundabouts to create attractive corridors and slow traffic. And I'm sure you've read through the material, and I think what's being proposed fulfills both of those land use goals and objectives very well. So the aerial photograph, should we need to refer to it, it's pretty much tabletop farmland. There is an old homestead here, and there are some tree lines and breaks around and actually right through the property. I will point out that this is the Gunlings property. They're represented by Mr. Steve Elliott. He provided you a letter of some objections, and I'm sure he has some remarks tonight in that regard, but when we get to that point, that is where the property is located, and you can see the proposed development is located around that property. So the proposal. Let me walk you through a little bit the context of this development because that's important. So here is the communities of Glen Ross, sections 11 through 22. These are the sections south of Cheshire Road. And these vary in lot sizes from 65-foot widths all through this area of the development to 80-foot widths, which were really intended to be adjacent to the golf course. And obviously in this section, they're also adjacent to the Ohio Health piece of property as well. And then some smaller width properties in the communities of Glen Ross case, they're actually 50-foot wide properties that are being built, and some of those have conveyed to date. Belmont Place, I think you're all familiar with this, and council has just approved the further expansion of this subdivision. These are all 65-foot width lots for single-family detached homes. And then there are some developments that are proposed in various stages of approval that are not within the city of Delaware and not within, obviously, our control to decide on what exactly goes there. This is Peach Blow Road and the roundabout approximate location of where the roundabout is shown on this particular plan. The main spine road, if you will, that goes through the Evans Farm development and also touches this metro development. The metro development is comprised of a mix of lot sizes and types, single family as well. Some are small lot, but also a school, elementary school has been proposed here closer to Peach Blow Road. This section of the development right along Peach Blow Road is what's shown here on the right, and that's here, as it stands today, planned for commercial and office development along Peach Blow Road. And so that would be immediately across the street from this proposed development in the Gurdon. So that's the kind of the context within which we're trying to fit this plan within our community. And of course, the large Evans Farm development. Again, this is Peach Blow Road. There are some lots, and obviously this configuration has changed and will change a little bit to accommodate that road we just showed on the last slide. But there is a piece of the Evans Farm development on the north side of Peach Blow Road that's not yet annexed to the city of Delaware, may never be annexed to the city of Delaware. But obviously everything from Peach Blow Road north is within our current utility boundary. Things to the south are not within our current utility boundary. So that's the context in which we're sort of fitting this 100-acre piece, and Mr. Gurdon is trying to plan for and accommodate development within this piece. So the development itself consists of 263 dwelling units on that approximate 100 acres. There are 27% open space included within this development, distributed on either side of the Spine Road, which continues from the community of Glen Ross. It would go from Cheshire to Peach Blow Road and connect into a roundabout location here on Peach Blow Road. One note, the city of Delaware does not control Peach Blow Road and the access of Peach Blow Road, and upgrades to Peach Blow Road, that's Delaware County and the county engineer, and so there's been lots of coordination, obviously, between our engineering office and theirs, but most importantly between the applicant and the county engineer with respect to this. With all the dynamic nature of development that's happening in this area that I just went over with you, there were lots of discussions at the county engineer as to exactly where to set this roundabout location. And then should it be a roundabout or a traditional intersection, who would pay for it, who would do those sorts of things. As we understand it now, the county would actually do the roundabout improvement, but all the developers would be required to pay their fair share towards that improvement, including this development. So just wanted to set that context for you. So what we have are a continuation of the larger lots adjacent to communities of Glen Ross and adjacent to the Ohio Health property up here. These are 80-foot lots. There's 21 of them. They would require 100% natural materials, which is consistent with communities of Glen Ross. The green lots are 65-foot wide lots, which are the vast majority of the community of Glen Ross lots and all of the Belmont Place lots, and they are adjacent to both of those developments to continue that development pattern. One note, these lots do require 40% natural materials, which that depends whether you're in Belmont or communities of Glen Ross, but that's consistent with those developments as well, if not upgraded over those two developments. And lastly, the, I guess, light yellow to me, lots are the proposed 52-foot wide lots. They are proposed to be significantly upgraded in natural materials over the community of Glen Ross's 50-foot wide lots, for example, which require 25% natural materials in communities of Glen Ross. These are upgraded to at least 40% natural materials on the front of the structures. But they are located kind of adjacent, across from, there's open space, but across from that planned commercial development, buffered from the Gunling property, although base code would not require buffering single-family use to single-family use. We just don't require buffering between those like uses. There is a significant amount of buffering shown here and is captured in your plan, and we can go over that in a little more detail if you like as well. The other thing to point out is that This is an unloaded collector road that will include significant mounting and landscaping, and as proposed, preservation of that tree line that we saw in the aerial photograph in this location, as well as preservation of trees in this location here. So moving on to some of the open space plan, it really is divided between the east and west portions of this property. Some of it does have stormwater retention ponds in them as required by code. There's a bike path proposed consistent with our bike path plan along Peach Blow Road and consistent with what's been developed in Belmont Place. Most of the open space would occur at this location, the old housestead, if you will, to preserve the trees, but also put in some pavilions and bocce court. And there are other things proposed. One note here that the applicant had to work around was a 150-foot wide, high tension wire easement. And so that's in this location of the property. It was our direction to, although there's no particular requirement against it, but it was our direction to not have lots underneath that easement, I think for obvious reasons. But that could allow for some linear open space and programming to really be able to use the space. That is not uncommon here in Delaware and Delaware County. There are other open space areas dispersed throughout, which could include some tot lots and other improvements as well to service the whole subdivision. And these are probably a little hard to see here and a little bit easier in your packet, but it basically shows the mounting and landscaping proposal along that Winterbourne Drive here in cross-section relief, and we can talk about that in more detail if you like. Some of the site details proposed and included in your packet: bocce courts, tot lots, shelter houses. They've included entry signage, columns, and even temporary signage, which isn't really required at the preliminary stage, but is nice to know what they're planning for the subdivision. And of course, we like to try to see it in a total package, and then as final plans and plats come forward, and in this case, a preliminary plat would also need to be brought forward to you. Should this be approved, it's good to put this in the full context as we go into those final development areas of the development. From tree preservation perspective, they have accounted, have a good accounting of all the trees. We know where they are. We know what the proposal is for preservation of trees and for the removal of trees. And they are proposing to preserve far more trees than they are removing. That is consistent with our other planned mixed-use overlays, and there's a schedule provided in your zoning text that is also consistent with other PMUs in that regard. There aren't a whole lot of trees on this site, but some of them are pretty big, and some of the biggest trees are contained within that landscaping along the road and then down in this corner as well. So the phases of the plan: the first phase of the plan would be this southwest corner and would connect to Belmont Place up. Basically, the Ohio Health lot was a flag lot before Glen Road was there. It was a flag coming off of Peach Blow Road. It's about 80 feet wide, and that's in this location. Ohio Health has the option to put a road up there or driveway up there. From this road's location up, it could be a private drive, for example. They haven't decided what they want to do at this point in time. But this development, and this has been through our engineering department, and Bill can speak more to this, through this leg of the Ohio Health flag lot would connect into this development with a public road system. And they do have, I believe they have secured Ohio Health's approval for that. Mr. Shea can speak more to that at this point. They would have to, at any rate, to affect this plan. The other location is the roundabout, and the third location would be to Winterbourne to the north. There would be a fourth location then stubbed in for what may become this piece of Evans Farm in the future. May not, but it'd be a road stub to be able to get across to the other subdivision and connect our road network as well, and manage the access really along Peach Blow Road. The applicant did supply actual house elevation examples, and these, should you approve this, these would become part of the zoning plan and zoning text as well. So as we go into finals and we go into building permits, we would expect to see at least this level of architecture and natural materials. And of course, it'd have to be consistent with the zoning text as well. But these are house elevation examples for the 52-foot wide lots, showing eave overhangs, natural materials, pretty significant roof pitches, and other things that we would normally expect within a single-family subdivision here in the city of Delaware. Moving on to the house example, elevations for the 65-foot lots. Obviously, the houses get a little bit bigger. There's a little bit more two-story units as well, but I think the overall natural materials of fit and finish of these homes are consistent with the 52-foot wide lots and consistent with other developments that we've approved in the area. And the 80-foot wide lots, the homes get larger yet, obviously, but the same level, I think, of fit and finish and design of these, so that overall there'll be a blending of the different unit sizes and lot sizes. One of the things that we do recommend, it is a condition of approval that was recommended by staff and Planning Commission, is that the 52-foot wide lots, actually all the lots, have minimum square footage sizes for their homes that are consistent with those that we've approved with other developments as well. And that varies depending on whether they're one-story homes or two-story homes as to what that minimum would be. So with that, I'm going to stop. I think that's a basic overview of the proposal here. I know you all are very good about reading your packets and your information, asking questions that you might have. Your Planning Commission did recommend unanimous approval at their May 1st meeting of these cases with the conditions noted, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
I had one. I was not able to read the letter. It appeared almost like a bad fax. Some of the words weren't legible. I could make out the general.
You have a copy on your desk?
I didn't see it.
I'm sure Steve has it.
It's at your desk. Everybody has it.
So, Councilwoman Keller, to be
I missed it. Sorry.
To be clear, there were two letters.
Here it
just to
is.
be
Okay.
clear. Mr. Elliott had submitted one with Planning Commission. That was included in your packet this time, along with some other public comment for your review. And then Mr. Elliott updated the letter, and he can go over the updates of it to you. And that's the one that was at your desk. It was recently sent out.
Thank
So
you.
I
It was under something
I
else.
don't think there are huge substantive differences between the two letters, but I'll let him go over those details during his remarks.
I have a question. You know the little noodle pond that's off to the left-hand side?
The noodle pond.
The noodle pond, because we don't know what else to call it.
Well, that's what we started calling in that Planning Commission, I think for kind of obvious reasons.
Yeah.
This is what the mayor is referring to.
So how wide is that?
That piece of ground, I think, is about 125 feet wide or so, and 120, 125 feet. And then the Ohio Health flag lot is about 80 feet wide, just to set the context.
So is the water there only because there's nothing else we can do with that property, or because you need more retention wall?
Well, in my opinion, is I think the answer to that is yes, to both of those things you just said. Most importantly, the stormwater management needs to occur in this part of the site, and Bill can go over that in a little more detail as well. I know their engineers on Mr. Gurdon's team have engineered where these ponds need to go and how the water flows through this site, but also, water comes through this site and flows through this site on to the west, I believe, the west and the southwest.
I drove down there the other night. I was on my way to a restaurant and specifically drove past it and sat and looked at that gorgeous, gorgeous house that sits there.
Very nice.
And I just don't want to take away from that house in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I support the development, but that house is unbelievable. And I just want to make sure that this water will not affect them in any way, that I don't know, I just want to make sure that we're not hurting the neighbors. So.
Well, and Mayor, thank you for bringing that up. I didn't go in detail. It is detailed in the staff report, but on the east side of this property, first of all, there are quite a lot of existing large mature evergreens on this Gunlings property, and I think some of them may even be on the Gurdon's property. I'll let them fight that out, but there's a lot of trees along both sides of the property. From about this location through to about this location, you go from 25-foot width of buffer all the way up to, I think 230 foot of buffer. That would include 5 to 6 foot high mounds and soldier courses of evergreen trees, and in fact, they're sort of a double row of mounting. And one of the things we talked about, as you know, at the Planning Commission is we want to get that mounting and buffering in there according to this plan and according to the text, but we want to make sure that we don't do that in a way that damages that existing tree row that they have as well, because it's pretty robust. So as we were to go in a final development plan, we would get with our city arborists and Ted Miller, Parks and Natural Resource Director, and obviously the applicants, experts, and make sure that the plans, at least from our perspective, weren't likely to do that to the existing tree row. On the north side, there is a pond on their property, and I agree with you, it's a beautiful house, beautiful piece of property. I've said that before, it sure is. There's a beautiful pond back here with some mounding and trees to the back, and so the proposal would be to continue that with about a 25-foot width buffer. That would allow you to get maybe a 3 to 4 foot high mound with a soldier course of evergreen trees in there as well. So at Planning Commission, so that's in my opinion, that's pretty well buffered and pretty much in keeping with the some of the remarks of the Edge Group's letter that was submitted with Mr. Elliott's letter. But it doesn't address, additional landscaping along the so-called noodle pond, which, you could require a row of evergreen trees or whatever. Another thing that came up at Planning Commission was because of this, these 290 degrees, some of Belmont Place residents were also interested in having some additional buffering here. There is a tree row in that flag lot of Ohio Health. And what we've pledged to do, and Bill is on board with this as the plans are developed, is to keep that tree row as much as possible while you can still fit the road in, obviously safely. But the applicant has already met with these neighbors to put some additional trees, particularly right here where the road would kind of end, be pointed at the backyard of one particular property. And I've worked with Kevin McCauley at Stavroff. He's been accommodating to the fact that there are some easements and stormwater conveyances at the back of these lots, as is normal, but there is some room for some additional planting at the back of those lots as well. So the combination would be a little bit of a layered effect of landscaping over there. So I know it's a long-winded riff on your point there, but I just wanted to go over that as well.
So how about on the east side of our noodle pond? How much greeneries are there? If you're
On
looking
the
at
east side of the noodle pond,
well,
you
between that and the house. How
yeah,
much is
there's
there?
an existing row of trees, and I think Mr. Gurdon will go over this. I'm sure Mr. Elliott will as well. There would be room, from my perspective, more than likely. These haven't been final engineered yet, the ponds, but there could be, I think, easily room for at least a row of trees on either side of this pond, based on the information that we have today.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Would the applicant like to come forward at this time?
My name is Bob Gurdon. I live at 10590 Wellington Boulevard, Powell, Ohio, 43065. I just want to thank City Council for allowing us to be in front of you today. We've been working on this project for about 2 years. We had some pretty sizable difficulties trying to gain some easements from Ohio Health. That's what took the majority of the time. Everybody was instrumental, of including Mr. Eflin, Matt Weber with engineering, Bill Farino, in trying to convince Ohio Health to allow us to have the easements across their 80-foot strip just west of the Noodle Pond. So, due to the way that the Ensigns Lane came into our property, we had to kind of configure that roadway. We had some different configurations of roadways dealing with Mr. Gundling and a couple other ways where we finally came to the conclusion of having what we call kind of a Z formation. So it's kind of a jog in the road right there that we finally came up with. So excuse me, I just want to introduce everybody that's been on the team for the 2 years. Mike Shea is our attorney, former mayor of the city of Delaware. Todd Ferris is our land planner. Jack Brickner is a consultant who is also very instrumental in working out a deal with Ohio Health. And then Brian Burkhart's with CEC. He's the engineer on board. So we've been all working together on this thing for quite some time. Dave has done an excellent job kind of going over everything. I just want to bring up just a couple quick points, and then we'll go to questions or other comments. So the no load road that goes through the middle of the property that the development would be paying for, the landscaping, the bike paths, that road alone has a price tag of about $2.2 million on it that the development will pay for and put in, and that will be owned by the city eventually. Ohio Health is about a $350,000 deal that the development will have to pay for. We're adding a secondary access for Belmont Place, which was one of the requirements for our project. They only had one access. I know they're starting another development just to the west of there, another phase of their development. So we have a secondary access for them, and we also have utility we're now able to get to the utilities from the city. The roundabout on Peachblow Road, we worked with the county and the city to come to terms of where that was going to be, and that the county would put actually install the roundabout. There's one on Cheshire Road. I don't know if you've driven by it, but it's beautiful, especially at night. They have all the lights up there. It'll all be lit up like that. It's really a gorgeous area down there, and they have that pool area down there as well. So the landscaping alone that we're including in the package is close to $600,000. We have about 10,000 lineal feet of bike paths and sidewalks that we're adding. We have 2 tot lots. We have another lot area up in the front. We really believe it's a good project. I think Todd did an excellent job laying it out. This type of mixed-use product is prevalent in the area. Pulte has it. Like you said, Evans Farms has it. There's another development going out by the high school, Long Hill, that's mixed use with a lot of open spaces, is kind of being extremely prevalent, and we're trying to do the same thing here. So we really believe in the product. We think it's a good layout, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have for us. Thank you very much.
Questions? No one? Come on, Lisa. I know you better than that. Okay. Okay, no questions? We'll open up the public and see what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'd like to come forward at this time and give us your name and address for the record.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi. John Gunling. That's my house that we're talking about there.
Could you give the address for the record? I'm sorry.
957 Peachblow.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Elliott, 6338 Buckman Street in Lewis Center. Excuse my voice tonight. I have come down with a cold or sinus infection, so I'll try to go as long as I can with my cough drops. I'm a real estate lawyer with a firm in Columbus, Baker and Hostetler, and I've been working with the Gunlings now for a couple months on this development and responding to it. At the Planning Commission meeting, the Gunlings weren't able to be present because of a pre-planned vacation, but luckily John is able to join me here tonight. All of you did get the letter of objections, hopefully, which I think pretty well summarizes our objections to this plan. We understand, I say we, he understands better than I do. We're not going to stop this development, but we want to do all we can to have it done in a way that preserves the value of as best we can, of the Gunling house and property. And secondly, one of the ways of doing that is to make sure that this process is going forward correctly and looking at the correct things as this development approaches. To kind of go down the list of items in the objection letter, and I won't go through everything. One of our biggest concerns was the lack of commitment of the access points, both at the point of the roundabout, that there was no commitment to the south of that, and at the what's been called the Z connection on the Ohio Health Panhandle lot. I've heard tonight that was resolved. We heard at the Planning Committee meeting 6 weeks ago that those agreements had been finalized and were in the process of being signed. Despite numerous attempts to get copies of them in the last 6 weeks, we haven't been provided with any of that. This is the first we heard that was resolved. It was 5 minutes ago. So I hope it is. But the way it looked previously, they were using a strip of land owned by Ohio Health with no easement or other rights to drive any kind of a road across it, especially with that kind of a Z connection, and looking forward to what Ohio Health might want to do with that panhandle in the future. So I'd be interested in hearing exactly how that did get resolved, if we can do that. The second point to note is we had asked a number of times, and I appreciate Dave has been very cooperative to us in this process, but wanted to see the traffic study that I think thought was going to be done before this point. We found out about a month ago after the Planning Committee meeting that it has been commissioned to be done and is being done, but it only relates to the roundabout and the extensions of the roundabout. It does not relate to Peach Blow Road. And if you look at the bigger map of what's there in the housing that's on Peach Blow Road at this time, that was a concern to us. The next point, and I thank the mayor for taking the time to go out and look at the Gunling home, and it is a beautiful property. They've been there 25 years and taken very good care of it, improved it quite a bit, which is why we're trying to do what we can to preserve the value of it. But our next concern is with the mounding around it, and I think it is treated in a way up along the top, and would be the east side of it, in a way that's compatible with a proposal that we provided before the Planning Commission meeting from a landscape group. We have not met with the developer, despite efforts, I think, someone on both sides to get together to try to make the plan look more like our proposal, and at the moment I don't think it's quite there. Our biggest concern is the noodle pond that we've talked about, which we were told, I think, at the Planning Commission meeting, that it was such a narrow piece of property that with the pond in there wouldn't be room for mounding on that piece of property, and because I'm not an engineer, but the slope of the mounds would be too big to be on really either side of that noodle pond. So yeah, I think it's been set up without a whole lot of mounding or buffering on that side of it. We also raised concerns about making sure that whatever was approved and put in would be maintained in the future, and having a requirement for the HOA to maintain that. We were hoping we could see some documentation of that. That hasn't really happened. The next item on my list is the bike path. If you go where the bike path is currently planned, by my understanding, it's going to end at the Gunlings property on both sides. And I would presume we would put up some kind of signage that would say private property, no trespassing, or something like that. But it is not permitted by the Gunlings to go across that property, and we really haven't had discussions with the developer about resolving that. The next item, separate from the mounding, is just the pond itself and the size of it and the shape of it, it being kind of an awkward development piece to go along with the Gunlings property next to it. The next item is the housing and the development itself. If you look at it, the most of the housing around the Gunling property is the 52-foot wide lots. And there is some of the green, which I think is 65, but we believe that to be non-compliant with the city's comprehensive plan. I don't know if there's a written definition of entry level, but a 52-foot lot with a 1,500 square foot house on it sounds to me like an entry level property. Those are the main items of our proposal, or our objection letter rather. We would be glad to answer any questions. John, do you have anything you want to add to what I said?
Well, just that the buffering that we're talking about on the east side of the property, from what I've read in the plan, is white pine trees, 20 foot on center. That's not much of a buffer. I know they're talking about, they're worried about the mound interfering with the trees I've already planted there. I'm not quite sure that's an issue.
And again, we would just hope you would consider these things, and we do appreciate your time and listening to us tonight. And our goal, again, being just to preserve as much of the value aesthetically and economically as we can of the Gunlings home.
You know, well, one more thing I'd like to say about the sidewalk is I'd certainly like to see it go somewhere else. It's pretty presumptuous to just stub it off on either side of my lot. You know, we have not agreed to let it come through there and will not, so it just seems, there's no point in there if I own.
I don't think they did it
Leave it
intentionally to.
Well, they, at one point, they had it ran around the back, okay, and connected in that way. It just doesn't make sense to just stub it off. I don't think anybody here would want it just stubbed off. But, you know, I would certainly like to see the buffering go all the way to the road, along my side of the property there, so, where the sidewalk would go again, I don't know. Well, I could certainly put in my own buffering at some point in front of the sidewalk, but, that is an issue for me.
Any questions for us?
Because a sidewalk what it's gonna create is trespassers.
They're gonna walk their bike through there. Yeah.
People walking in the street. It's a busy street, it's gonna get a lot busier. So, I mean, it kind of already happens now. So, you know, they come out of Belmont Place, they've stubbed that off. So, it creates a pathway there that's not a pathway.
All right.
Yeah, appreciate it.
May I ask one question?
Absolutely.
So if you could kind of redo this plan, I'm just curious, how would you change it to make it more pleasing?
One thing I would do is put the, we had a plan originally, the original plan the developer brought to me, had a pond just to the east of our home, a retention pond, instead of under the power lines. They also had much bigger, the bigger lots around our home. And they were floating the idea of where the noodle pond is, they wanted to trade me that lot for a possible access out of Belmont Place, but they needed to clip the back corner of my property with their road. They pulled that offer because they said the noodle lot was required and had to be there for the drainage. So we moved on from there to 3 or 4 more plans that got consecutively worse. Honestly, they almost seemed retaliatory to me from the first plan we looked at. So, and I'd certainly like, you know, if you're asking what would be better, I'd like certainly a better buffer than 20 foot on center, 3 to 4 foot dirt hill that will take my lifetime to grow in. The rest of it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? Did you have anything to say, to add?
The question came up, and first let me just say that this has been a very difficult development to get all the parts moving in the right direction. We spent a lot of time tonight talking about Ohio Health and them trying to preserve what they need for their development sometime in the future. Additionally, in I think in our team, we always forget about that we also had to negotiate with the Glen Road Capital Group. And when you talk about the Noodle Pond, and you look at the pond to the north, the reasons those are located there is the one at the north is regarding this easement to the Glen Road Capital Group, from the Glen Road Capital Group to cross, and the memorandum of understanding with regard to an agreement that was executed between Ohio Health and the Gurdon LLC. And in those corridors, you have points that come across, pipes that will be in the ground that will drain to the west, and then down at this point in the lower corner on the Belmont Estates property is another outlet. And those are the only two outlet points for the drainage systems, therefore requiring the 2 points of where those 2 ponds are. Now, their ponds were located at one time in an early drawing over closer, but the reason that they're there is we have 2 separate drainage districts, and we had to allow for those. Our expert is here this evening, can address all the calculations and things like that. We also have, if you would care to see them, my client, there are numbers of photos showing the properties, the Gunling property, their property at different angles, and show you the kind of existing tree canopies that exist in the area. So, you know, there were a lot of things to overcome, and the reason, Mr. Gunling was absolutely correct. Earlier, we looked at coming straight out and curving up. However, that curve did not meet city code, and therefore everybody started looking at other options. The whole corridor along Cheshire Road is under the control of Delaware County. They have easement rights already, not only on our property, the Gunlings, all the properties to the south. What hasn't been talked about is just to the, it would be the southwest portion. That ground is currently, that's the old valves and presses, and is currently zoned industrial. So there's mixed uses already existing in that area. It'll be interesting to see the kind of development that Dave talked about by the Don Kenny Group, that will, how they're planning commercial. Immediately to the south of this will be commercial, followed by the school, then followed by the residences. So this development is going to be up against some commercial activity. That's going to take place, and it's going to impact a number of people in that area, including the homes and the residents that my client is proposing. Now, the memorandum was executed and filed. It was executed on May the 13th. I took it up personally and filed it, and it was filed the very next day, and it is a public record. The agreement is not a public record. The memorandum's there to emphasize the key points but not all the discussion and all the terms which have been negotiated. And it's agreement that are, where different parties are gonna have different rights at different times, not only to Mr. Gunn, or to Ohio Health property, but also on the Gurdon property. So, there are different things and this was an extremely lengthy process. Ohio Health, and from your own experiences dealing with them, they're an institution, and they deal with things and take on things at different speeds than the rest of us. But they were fair. They dealt with us honestly. It just took a long time to get it through the process, and that is recorded. So the deal is done. The easement with Glenroe Capital, which was done a long time ago, and the easement with Ohio Health. So the roadway configuration is going in as planned, subject to your approval. And you know, in a perfect world, you'd like to have things maybe a little bit different and stuff like that. We have photos tonight. If you want to see them, my client can pull up the photos and show them to you of what exists there and how it looks right now, and you know, around the property. We were very concerned, very concerned. Mr. Elliott has made it very clear that they've been concerned about the screening and mounding. I think in all our efforts, and staff can speak to that, we have attempted and will continue to address those. We're going to get into a lot more specific detail when you come back in for final development plan. This is just the beginning phases. I think it's going to be a very meaningful development. And I was somewhat amused by the comment that 52-foot lots are the starter homes. Well, no. Starter homes are based on per square foot cost, and at this point in time, you're looking at about $175 a square foot. So you're looking at significant cost even in a 1,500 square foot home. And if you look at the homes that are being built down in the Dublin area that are on the less than 52-foot lots, at the corner of Jerome Road and Glick Road, they're quite substantial. Of course, they don't have the setbacks that we're dealing with here. So we've tried to address all those concerns, and we will continue. You're going to get another look at this. You're going to be able to have opportunity. Everybody's going to have an additional say and input as this moves through the process into final development plan. I can tell you, it has been a significant challenge, and I think on behalf of our entire team, we are very thankful of the efforts made by city staff, Dave Eflin, Lance Schultz, the people in the engineering department, Bill Farino, Matt Weber. I mean, they attended meetings with the county. The reason that the roundabout is, that was a negotiated deal, and Rob Riley, the deputy county engineer, said it. And he said it because of that high tension line. They do not want any rotaries or intersections under high tension lines. Apparently static electricity causes problem for their employees when they're making repairs. I was not aware of that either. But we're here, to answer any other questions that you might have. We would strongly encourage you to pass this tonight. I mean, this is as the old saying goes, time is money, and we have tried to address every single issue we can, and we are going to continue to work with the people in the area. We're going to continue to work with the governments other than the city of Delaware, and we've made commitments to Delaware County as a part of their program. And we reached agreement with the county and with Don Kenny's group to put that roundabout there. And it meets the primary requirements, actually a little bit more than 2,400 feet from the railroad track, which was their mandate.
Seems like this has been going on longer than 2 years, because I remember going to the hospital in Dublin asking for this easement a long time ago. I don't know what year it
You
was.
and our city manager.
Yes, Tom and I went together.
And I think Dave's had a few conversations with them, and I think, I can tell you, we've had lots of conversations.
The bike path, is there, did it used to be in a different spot? Has it always been in this spot? Have we
Bob
ever
can better
talked about
address
moving
that.
it?
I don't remember.
Well, I can just tell you from the staff's perspective, the location of the bike path along Peachblow Road is completely in accordance with our adopted pedestrian and bicycle plan. And you need not look at any other evidence than the fact that Belmont Place has the bike path there. This is consistent with what we know with Cheshire Road and Peachblow Road, and I hear this argument all the time that the path shouldn't come in because there is no path there. However, somebody has to start putting in the first pieces of path. George, we've talked about this, a planning commission a lot when you were on a commission, and Chris and Lisa. So when you have the burden of hand, the development of hand, they put in their piece of the path. And that may not include the Gunlings property. A planning commission, as everybody knows here, I asked if Mr. Gurdon and the Gunlings could work together to close that gap. You know, basically on Bob's dime with the development here. And that's fine. If that doesn't want to occur now, it doesn't have to occur now. The gap can be there, and we can have signage and do those sorts of things to make sure that you at least minimize the potential for people to come across the property.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Shade. I know we know who you are, but do you mind stating your name and address just so someday when they listen again?
Yeah. I'm Michael, middle initial, our last name Shade. I'm an attorney at law. My office address is Post Office Box 438, Delaware, Ohio. And if you want a street address, it's 1 West Winter Street, Suite 410.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, when you were talking about the road, earlier you called it Cheshire, I think we're on Peachblow.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't confuse the people.
Gosh, I've got developments going on up there too, so.
I know, I just wanted to clarify. Any other questions or comments? From Mr.
Does anybody have any questions on the annexation? We kind of.
Go ahead.
I do have a question.
Okay.
So, help me procedurally with, let's say that, could we move forward with the annexation but continue to work on the development plan? Or do those two things have to happen together at the same time?
I think my client would prefer that they happen at the same time.
I would tell you from staff's perspective, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, the one thing that you need to do is act on the annexation first, so that it then is within the city of Delaware, and then you can act on the rezoning and development plan approval. So my answer to your question is yes, you can separate those two issues, but I would do the annexation first, which is, it appears first on your agenda.
And one more thing to clarify. Dave, correct if I'm wrong, this is just a preliminary, right?
This is a rezoning to
The-
plan development, so it sets that specific text and the development plan, at least the preliminary plan. But there would be a preliminary plat that would be required. That's not part of this. And then there would be final plans and plats, phase by phase, section by section. That will come later.
I know we've talked about this before, Dave, but I just want to make sure I'm not giving bad advice. Is there an opportunity to request change at the time of the final development plan as opposed to doing that on the preliminary?
There would be, in my opinion, within reasonable bounds, because at that point the developer needs to rely upon what is approved to be able to get financing and move forward with the development. I think that's pretty obvious. And so that's set forth in my world with respect to the zoning text and the preliminary plan. But for things like, for example, do we want a row of evergreen trees along the east bank and the west bank of the Noodle Pond? That would be something that could be reasonably accommodated during that final development plan, in my opinion.
You couldn't say you can only do half the number of houses or something like that, but for some of these issues, that's within the area of reasonableness that you could.
Yeah, or the mound on the east side, as it's shown here, is 5 to 6 feet, and then we want it 12 feet tall. At final development plan, I don't think that's reasonable. So I think if there are those kinds of items that you still want to discuss, that this is certainly appropriate forum, and you can certainly let the developer know that your expectation when you get to that final is whatever it is with respect to extra landscape. That helps me implement your will as well when we get to that phase of the development.
Okay, I have another question about the noodle pond. So I have an issue happening in my ward right now. I'm working with some constituents with some complaints regarding a retention pond and fountains not working and algae developing on the top and insects becoming an issue. This noodle pond will border a large section of the Gundlings property. So who will be in charge of the maintenance of it and what requirements are on it to make sure that it stays well maintained and doesn't become a nuisance?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. It's a great question. And in response to Mr. Elliott's comments, and I think I responded this way at the Planning Commission meeting to your question about this as well, the landscaping, the mounding, the common improvements, including the ponds, would have to be maintained by the HOA. That would be a matter of this zoning decision. So that would be a matter of zoning, and that would have to be carried forward into whatever HOA documents they have. But regardless of that, at the end of the day, it's a matter of zoning at this point. So the HOA would have to maintain those. As you know, Councilwoman Keller, all our ponds need some type of aeration if they're to be wet ponds. And I think you're also maybe losing a sense of scale here. Again, that's 125 feet wide, so that pond's fairly significant size in that location, as opposed to maybe some of the shallower ponds that we have in some older developments as well. So these would have to have fountains or bubblers, some type of aeration within them, maintained by the HOA. So if they break, and these things break, the HOA would have to repair that. In terms of algicide and those sorts of more aesthetic things with respect to a pond, those sorts of things, I believe, are still allowed within its really rules by the state of Ohio with respect to what you can put in waterways and that sort of thing. So that can still happen. Things like vegetation around the ponds typically today are, the desire is to have vegetation grow around the ponds and have it be more natural. Does that answer your question?
It does. I'm just concerned because typically with an HOA, they have an interest in making sure that a pond is fairly well maintained if their houses are backing up to it. And this one, there's only like 1, maybe 2 houses that are adjacent to it. Yeah. So I guess my concern is once it is under HOA responsibility, they'll kind of say, looks good enough to us. And sometimes our hands are tied in those situations.
That's correct.
One of the things here is that if this drainage system does not work correctly, those property owners that are not immediately abutting it will be impacted. So it behooves that association to maintain that, because that corridor, this I like to call the west side, is flowing in one direction. The east side is flowing almost immediately south. And so those really, it benefits everybody if those systems work correctly. You also have, those ponds cannot discharge in violation of Ohio law. They now that we have the Old Tangi watershed standards, they must retain that water and discharge it in accordance with the calculations, and you have to have the mechanisms in place to make sure that that happens. So this is not something that every development we have in the city of Delaware is dealing with this, and so it's it's just one of those things that will have to be addressed. And those are when you get to the point where you're starting to develop, and this starts to go to the HOA. And there may be one HOA over the whole project. There may be 2 HOAs. whatever they are in the area they cover, they will be duty bound to the terms that you have set forth and the planning commission has recommended, and in turn you recommend to be incorporated, and they have to be incorporated in great specificity. So, and there's gonna be monies collected to make sure that that maintenance goes on.
Carolyn, were there any concerns about that pond at Planning Commission?
Just the same thing, the buffering around it. You know, so close to the other property. That was, we talked about the noodle pond a lot.
I mean, is there any room for compromise with the homeowners there?
Regarding what?
Just regarding the site plan and making it a little bit more, you know, not quite so intrusive on their property?
There's nothing intruding on their property.
Okay, not necessarily intruding, but I think if all of us can imagine ourselves living there and having our house there, it just seems like the site plan could have been done to impact them a little bit less.
Well, the people that are in the lots immediately behind theirs are looking out at the mound of dirt that was taken out for a pond. And they have a pond on their property. And I hope it's peaceful and enjoyable to them. This pond is not for beautification necessarily. It is for solving a problem of drainage of this part of this subdivision. And they have to be calculated to sizes, and those mathematical calculations, as I just went through, have to be discharged in a manner consistent with the law. And so they're stuck. Now, you have to understand, until you start to build it, until you start going through final development, there could be things that would change about it. Maybe it doesn't have to be quite as long. Those are initial calculations, not final calculations. It may not have to be as wide. You know, until you get into the details on final development plan, and I can tell you with all the effort that's been made, we've tried to dot every I and cross every T as skillfully as we can, meeting all the requirements of the city of Delaware. And when this comes back through, city staff is going to, first of all, the engineering department and planning department are gonna go through everything, as they always do, with a fine-tooth comb, making sure that everything is done correctly. And in this particular case, we think we've identified those things. Could some things change? Could that pond up at the north end be smaller? Yeah. But you also have to understand, we're also not only collecting for drainage systems on our property, we're also taking part of the Foley property and draining off that. So all this has to work together as a part of the process to make sure that we are meeting the requirements for runoff, and we're doing so in conjunction not only with the city codes, but also with state law. And in this particular case, the drainage systems in this area are not controlled by the city of Delaware, but are controlled by Delaware County because it goes into their feeder system.
Sure.
I think this is a nice development, but I also understand where the Gunlings are coming from with this home, and suddenly there's this huge development around them. So if, for instance, on what we're calling the noodle pond, if it's impossible or not practical to buffer that on the pond site, maybe there's some suggestions they would have that would occur on their site. Would the developer be willing to help support that? So, I mean, if we can't do it on the pond site, maybe we can give them something on their property that would also provide that kind of buffer. I just want to make sure that we do everything we can to take care of that.
And one final thing I want to make absolutely clear, whether you're being short-sighted in our memories, but the Gunling property was sold to their predecessors by the Gurdon family. So they're very cognizant of what they've done. The other 5-acre lot where the existing old farmhouse is, is gonna disappear. It's part of the overall plan. But, you know, we've tried to be very sensitive in addressing that. We certainly, I think, meet all the requirements. Now, when you get down to the final development, yeah, there may be some things that have to be done. Maybe we can't do it all on that land, and the parties would have to work that out. But you know, you could also maybe move that pond over slightly and have a little more room for mounding. Until you get in and get the final development details, we're trying to answer a problem that everybody thinks is there, but may not be there. We just, you know, it just gets us to the next level, and you all have final say on final development plans. So it will not go away. As I remember from you all, you have all very good memories.
Okay, did you want to come forward and say something? You and then Mr. Elliott. No, you first, because you've got up first.
I just wanted to maybe ask Brian to come up and kind of explain the pond and the drainage a little bit more to you in regards to how that's going to work.
Yeah, Brian Burkhart, 250 Old Wilson Bridge Road, Worthington, Ohio, 43085. So that pond is almost entirely for that 80-foot strip of the Ohio Health property. We're installing 300 feet now, but I have sized that pond for the full potential development all the way up to where their cluster tree rows are, where our north pond is. Their whole section drains onto Belmont Place. If they ever decided to extend that, they have no room, they have nowhere to put detention. So part of the negotiations to get easements to get across their property was to provide stormwater for their piece. So that whole piece is designed for a full build out of that Ohio Health Road. If that Ohio Health Road never got put in, that could be much smaller. I mean, we could make this thing smaller now and then make it bigger if they ever came down the road. They would, you know, if we put that in a drainage easement, we could start that much smaller because it's really would only be for the 300 feet, not for the full, 1,200, 1,400 feet.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Mr. Elliott, did you have another question?
I do.
Okay.
A couple of things. First of all, thank you for your insight and your questions regarding the noodle pond in particular. My first question, I guess I'd like to just ask the developer and their attorney, Mr. Shade, why they weren't willing to tell us a month ago that the agreement had been reached with Ohio Health, despite the fact we were asking about it. Secondly, I am a real estate lawyer and have been for 45 years, 40 years. I don't think you can build a road on somebody else's property based on a memorandum of understanding. Whether it's recorded or not, you need to own the property or you need to have an easement, a recorded easement to build what you're gonna do. So despite what's been said here tonight, without myself seeing it, or we rely on your counsel to look at the fact they really do have access to, or the ability to put a road in on the Z part of this property on their side. I think the suggestions about dealing with a lot of these problems at this stage, or objections at this stage, that's been our desire all along, because we understand that once this is approved, we're not going to be watching this. You know, we have jobs to do, and what happens with this, and we understand that only certain minor things can be changed at the final development plan stage. And our preference would have been to deal with all these things at this stage. We've tried very hard to do that. That plan has very little input, or reflects very little input from our side, to be honest with you. Any questions? Thank you.
I can address that.
Okay.
The memorandum that was executed did not include an easement. It includes the referral of the easement, but the city of Delaware required that the easement be made between Ohio Health and the city of Delaware, not my client. My client has only agreed to pay for the improvements, to have the right to put the road where it has been reached by agreement between my client and the city of Delaware on the Ohio Health property, and Ohio Health has acquiesced in that. But the final easement won't be done until that's ready to be built. And that document has been submitted to them, and they are holding that. Funds have been escrowed to assure that with a neutral party, an escrow agent. And when that's ready to go, then the Ohio Health will execute, and then the City of Delaware will execute the easement. The easement will be of record at that point in time, but Gurdon will not be a party to it. It'll only be between the City of Delaware and Ohio Health. And that was a requirement imposed on my client, and my client willingly accepted that as a condition of this overall arrangement for the drainage areas and the roadways. So,
Madam Mayor, just to verify, Mr. Shade is correct. There was originally an attempt to work out some sort of easement between the two private parties, but as a city attorney, I said I don't want to have a private easement and get somehow transferred to the city, because it's going to end up being our right-of-way. So we said, however you guys want to work it out, we want the easement to come to us. So Mr. Shade is correct. We could have built in some language to say the easement's between them, but then they have the right to transfer it to us. But we did work it out between planning and their attorneys that we would get the easement at the end, because it's going to be our road. Is that fair, Mr. Shade?
yes, that is correct.
Does that answer your question?
I guess I still don't, they couldn't build the road there right now, and is Ohio Health obligated to somebody to grant an easement that will allow that road to be built?
Yes.
You concur?
Well, my understanding is there's an agreement between Ohio Health and the developer to provide us with the easement that we need. So assuming that they live up to their agreement, I have to trust them that they're going to do it. But correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, I'm not sure if we're getting down in the weeds too much, because if they don't have that, they can't build this anyway, right? I mean,
No, they would have to go to, amend the development plan and perhaps even the zoning text if this were to be approved, and that didn't occur, to provide for another means of ingress and egress to at least phase one.
so if we're sort of requiring the road to be built there, if for some reason their deal falls through, or if it doesn't exist, then they can't meet the requirements of the development plan. So it's kind of in our case, it's a moot point, just wouldn't happen then.
It's not really any different than Belmont Place's ditch petition that had to happen for stormwater management requirements for Belmont Place, that happened after you took action on that zoning and that preliminary development plan as well. So had they not been successful in that ditch petition, they probably would have had to amend that plan.
The document, the agreement made between the parties, of which the memorandum references, is a purchase of easements and acquisition option agreement. And it was executed on May the 13th of this year. There are the signatures, both by Ohio Health and Gurdon LLC. And I do not have the authority to release this document to anyone without the consent of Ohio Health. However, the memorandum that references this, and that document is titled Memorandum of Purchase of Easements and Acquisition Option Agreement, which evidences this agreement is filed of record. It is binding. This is a fully enforceable agreement between the parties, and the benefactor will be the City of Delaware when they ultimately obtain the easement, of which my client is paying for.
Thank you. Any more questions?
I'd just like to see additional buffering for the neighbors.
The noodle pond and the neighbors?
Or on the east side.
Okay, still public hearing, come on forward.
Mr. Shea brought up the fact that they sold me a 5-acre
If you
lot.
can, you have a low voice, if you could talk to the
Okay.
microphone, because this
Yeah.
is all recorded.
All right. He brought up the fact that they sold me a 5-acre lot, which is absolutely true, because the zoning at the time in Berlin Township was 5-acre lots. So it was reasonable for me to assume that those would be 5-acre lots. So that's what I expected at the time, and here we are.
Yes. We're still in public hearing.
Mr. Browning, can I have a quicker, please?
Do you want this presentation or your?
Yeah, is this mine?
No. You want your?
Yes, please. So I took some photos of the Gunling property that I'd like to show you of the existing screening and buffering that he has put in quite some time ago. We're towards the end here, so bear with me. This is Mr. Gunling's property. You can see top part would be the west side of his property. Those are the existing trees that he has there. This is a picture of the trees out towards Peachblow Road, looking north along his western edge of his property. His barn is probably 30 feet tall. Those trees are at least that tall. This is standing in that strip, 120-foot strip, looking at the west side of his property. Another picture of the same, his existing. That's the back corner, the back left northwest corner of his property.
Okay.
Again, that's the northwest corner. This is the back of his property, looking straight down east. So you can see he has an area there, that's where he mounted the spoils from when he built his pond back there that he has maintained. This is looking due south from the back north end of his property. That's where the pond is on the other side of that.
Okay.
This is the northeast corner of his property. So this is where the mound is. This is all of his area behind his house. There's probably at least 100-foot section back there that's overgrown with trees where he put the spoils of his dirt. So just this is the east side of his property where we have the mounding. Obviously, whatever city council would like me to do to move forward with the project, I'm willing to do. But if there's additional screening on the west side, he's never going to see it.
I was interested on the east side.
I'm sorry?
I was interested on the east side.
On the east side we have, oh, okay. So that's this side, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
west
you.
side's done.
Okay.
Bob just showed us a lot of nice pictures of the back of the property, which are, I believe you call them deciduous trees that lose their leaves in the winter. So that what he showed you there right now is nice and full, but when we hit fall, the leaves do fall off and we will see anything that's there. Also, those they can be deceiving depending on the angle you take the pictures at. Certainly on the east side of my property, if you take it at the right angle, you can see right through the trees right into the field. So some more buffing would certainly be helpful.
Steve Elliott again. If I could just add to that, I agree with what John said about the angle of the pictures on the trees. And I've been to his house. I know you can see through them on the other side of the property. And I'm speaking for John now, but we would be willing and would have been willing all the time we've dealt with this up to this point to use the existing screening to the extent that's there to come up with a nice plan for the whole thing, which is not what we've done. And the screening on the Noodle Pond side starts well back off the road. I mean, there's no screening up along the road, as far as I know, or very little at all at this point in time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to close this public hearing and move on. What is the wish of council tonight on the annexation? 1929.
So if I could separate the annexation from
Do
the
it.
actual plan.
Do it.
I would be in favor of moving to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 19-32.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Mrs. Keller, a second by Mr. Schaefer.
Madam Mayor, we would prefer not going forward with that this evening. We want this all done as one package, and there's no hurry to do the annexation. We still have another meeting that we can have to do that, unless you're prepared to vote on all matters. My client, you know, we had talked early on about doing a pre-annexation agreement. We worked through details thanks to the hard work of city staff, so that would not be necessary and delay the process even more. And to give the city the benefit of having the annexation without the commitment that they're going to follow through. You know, we have told you this evening, my client has told you this evening, we will work with them. But the plan is, and it was approved unanimously by Planning Commission.
And I don't know that she's not gonna agree to this and somebody else is gonna come forward on the next one. That's one person making a statement.
Yeah,
So I
just-
can't take a straw poll here and say, if you vote on this, you're gonna vote on this.
But Dave, didn't you say that we could approve the annexation tonight, and we need to approve the annexation before we can vote on the rest of the stuff?
You can do that, I
Is
think
there a
you
downside to doing that?
Well, over
doesn't
the
want it.
objections of the applicant would be the downside, in my opinion.
Well, let me just make sure I understand procedurally. So, Vice Mayor Schaefer, if your question is just from an order standpoint, do we do the annexation first and the other ones, that is correct. Dave's statement was you could do the annexation tonight and the other pieces at a different meeting, and I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, and that's where Mr. Shade says he'd rather not have that happen. He wants to have them all done at the same time. But order-wise, Dave's right, you would probably do the annexation first, because why would you do the plan if it's not in the city? So I don't know I don't know how to get around this ordering standpoint, and Mayor's right.
We can do it however we want. He would prefer that we don't do it.
Yeah, okay, so here's the deal, we're never gonna get this to the point where everybody is gonna agree on this, and I don't see that we're gonna turn this down, but if you'd prefer that we wait on the annexation, I don't have a problem if we wait.
I don't know, I guess that's where I'm a little confused. I don't know why delaying this project when you're going to have final development say over this is a.
Because what will happen is you'll come back and say, we approved the preliminary, we had every anticipation of being able to go forward with this plan. So what I'm thinking is, if you are able to get with this family and work out some sort of compromise before the next meeting, we're delaying it 2 weeks, and then we could have a compromise and approve the whole thing all at once.
I don't think there's gonna be a compromise.
So,
I mean, they've been working on it for how long?
Madam Mayor, I hate to interrupt, I just thought this might be helpful. Dave, we talked earlier in general terms about the kinds of things that can be tweaked when it goes from preliminary to final. And at that time, we were talking about roads, we were talking about ponds. This question seems to be about buffering. Is that an issue that is fair game if they approve it tonight to dig into deeper at final, or is it the kind that, hey, they have expectations, we can't play with it?
I think my answer is going to be unsatisfactory to you. I think
Everything you say is.
I think it depends on what council would require of them. The zoning text will set forth the minimum buffering and requirements as the plan does now. I went over that on the north and the east side for you. It's really that west side along the Noodle Pond that, in my opinion, it's just a pond plus the existing buffering. That's all we're showing so far. And I think there were some comments about wanting to enhance that buffering on that west side potentially, is what I heard. So you could have some, but the argument would be, are they reasonable or not? You don't know that till you get there, right, Counselor?
You also have to be cognizant that as you approach the roadway, it's not that you can't continue to buffer on down, as the picture reflected. You can buffer down, but you cannot affect the line of sight if that roadway gets built and it becomes public roadway. You have to have line of sight coming out. And so that would represent somewhat a problem. I think as a compromise, add something to your text this evening that says that the matters involving the buffering around the Gunling property must be reached and agreed to by both planning commission and between the parties. It's a process. It's a submission, and just add the necessary language if you think protects that. But you know, we think that we will meet all those requirements. You've seen the plan. You know, you can't at that level look at how wide that is. It's very hard to get measurements off of that. But when you get down to the phase one, you're going to have much larger drawings, and you're going to see the detail around that property.
Well, in the past, we've had a developer that said he had to work with the neighbors, and he did, and he had to sign it. So I don't know if that's something to add. I don't think they want to build this pond unless they actually have to, not knowing if the road's going to go in. I think it was Brian that spoke. Why would they want to go to the expense of putting it in if they don't have to at this point? So we may be going way overboard, and this may not happen we know Ohio Health, we know how they work.
Madam Mayor, members of council, if I could suggest
Sorry,
something over.
that wasn't nice.
Whether you want to, it sounds like you probably don't want to vote on these this evening, so over the course of the next couple of weeks, what at least Darren and I could work out, regardless of what maybe the applicant or the Gunlings want, so I guess that puts us right in the middle of the two of them, is some language for an additional condition of approval that might say something like, on the west side of the Gunling property, regardless of whether there's a noodle pond there or not, there would be a minimum of a staggered row of evergreen trees to be determined on species of variety at final development plan, no less than 20 feet on center, which is our standard to allow them to grow. Recognizing the edge group suggests 15 feet on center. And that could be an additional condition that would address additional buffering on that side of the pond, if you're so inclined to direct us to do that sort of thing. And that might be equally unsatisfactory to the applicant and the Gunlings. I have no idea. I guess we'll hear right now. But it would add additional buffering on that side.
Well, I'm going to recommend that you do that.
Okay.
Because whatever we do is going to be somewhat unacceptable to all the parties involved, and this could go on forever, and has. So if you don't mind, if the rest of the council agrees.
Darren has a comment. I can tell by the look on his face.
I did, but Vice Mayor Schaefer may have mooted it.
Okay.
My comment was
Nice going.
mooted like we don't need it. It's good. Councilwoman Keller indicated she did not want to proceed on the other two items, but would do the annexation. That's not necessarily amenable to the applicant. My suggestion was going to be, I don't know what council's thought was, she could make a motion to table those two items till next week. If that is successful, then we could probably table the annexation till next week too. If it's unsuccessful, then it sounds like you can vote on it and you can vote on the annexation. But if Vice Mayor Schaefer is interested in possibly moving them all to next week, then I might be hearing a consensus about a vote.
We're well within the rules.
Oh, yeah.
Of
Let's
three
just take it
readings,
to
and
another
we're
meeting.
not
Yeah, we
delaying
don't have to table it,
anything.
do we? Don't we just take it to?
Yeah, we don't need
No,
to
I was
table
just
it.
trying to
Just
figure out a
withdraw
way to
your-
figure out if you were gonna not vote on the other items before you voted on the annexation, but if everyone has a consensus to take it to third reading, then that's not
But
necessary.
Darren, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's a motion, a second on the floor.
I know.
so it's
You
up
need
to-
to
So
withdraw
I'll
your
withdraw my
motion.
motion.
Agreed.
You withdraw yours?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
We'll see you all in 2 weeks, but we are not doing all this again. We are not doing public hearing again.
No,
Okay.
it's done.
Sorry. Okay, let's move on to 19. Consideration of ordinance number 19-34. Thank you all for coming this evening.
Ordinance number 19-34, an ordinance approving a community reinvestment area agreement with the Wesleyan Inn in the city of Delaware for investment in real property improvements on a building at 235 West William Street and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and is necessary to finalize negotiations and allow for the timely construction of the project, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Well, my paperwork says Sean Hughes, but you don't look like Sean Hughes. So welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, members of council, good evening. So I am not going to be going into anything that you don't already have, but I'm just kind of going to give you the cliff notes of the Westland Inn project and what the applicant is asking for. So, Mr. Manos has a request for a CRA. The CRA is for $500,000 in renovations to his current building, and as well as the $1.2 million addition to the building. So with that, we will say that this building is not in the historic district, but it is an upgrade to a very well-known historic building. So we appreciate his investment in that. For that, staff and the Tax Incentive Negotiation Committee recommends a 15% 15-year CRA abatement, which would be about a little more than $100,000 worth of savings over the course of the 15 years on the $2.7 million investment. With that, he will hire 4 full-time employees and an additional 8 part-time employees, which would total 8 full-time employees at $250,000 in payroll. And because it is $250,000 worth of payroll, there is no need for a school compensation agreement because we're not asking for more than 75%. And we also are not requesting a school pilot payment because the schools are getting an ROI of above 30%. So with that, the proposed package would have a negative ROI at 0.36% for the city, and with just under $70,000 in income tax after those 15 years. And although this is a negative ROI, we ask that you consider the opportunity of the spurred investment that could happen from this project. And the fact that lodging is a desired project so close to our downtown. So with that, I'm going to let Mr. Manos maybe make a few comments in terms of the investment that he's planning and the plans kind of from there.
I didn't know I was going to have to speak tonight.
You have to give us your name and address first.
Jim Manos, 5973 McEwen Court, Dublin, Ohio. And I was a little casual. So sorry about that. Things have been going great. I'm trying to push it forward as fast as I possibly can. It's hard with as many people involved, but I did meet with the schools and Sean and his people, and they were very excited for the project. And I think I'm saying this right, but even though it's a negative RPI, was it? Or is that base ROI? The property was never, did not have real estate taxes because it was owned by the university. So I don't think it's negative, but whatever.
Just speaking numbers.
So that's all I got.
Thank you.
And we are happy to answer any questions to the best of our ability.
Questions?
Where's the $100,000 calculation come from?
The $100,000
Over
in
15
terms
years.
of the
Tax savings?
So how that is going to work is the 15% that he saves on the improvements that he makes to his building over the course of that 15 years will add up to specifically $101,377.35. So over that course is what he would save with that 15% of that. I believe it was $1.2 million that we'll put in to
1.7.
1.7 for all of it to the existing building as well as the addition to that building.
If I understand it, the savings is 100,000, but he's bringing in 250,000 in payroll and taxes
Yeah.
and other stuff too.
And that 100,000's over 15 years,
Exactly.
whatever that.
The 250 is per year,
$7,000 a-
roughly, and
Yeah, 6,000 a
And
year.
property tax.
It is.
Was this pondered all along? Because I was surprised to have this come up at this stage.
That was brought to, I didn't know you could do this. It was brought to my attention by Sean and the powers that be.
Okay.
But I might have asked, I know there's downtown abatements on buildings that I've participated in, and I may have asked him, but they brought this to my attention, and I applied and paid, and met with a panel of, 8 people. to
And
go-
you
yeah.
requested a lot more than the 15, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it comes to a little less than $6,000 a
Yeah.
year.
But
So
you requested
I'm
100%.
thankful.
Yeah.
I think this is a positive thing for the city, both in terms of the building itself getting restored and having a nice boutique downtown hotel that you
Mhm.
don't have now.
I agree.
I think it makes sense.
Okay, is there a motion?
I will move to suspend the rules on ordinance 19-34.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
No.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of the emergency clause on ordinance 19-34.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
No.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
No.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 19-34.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion?
Nope.
Roll-
Thank you.
Not you, us.
Oh.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
No.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
very much.
Elaine, will you read 20, 21, and 22?
Ordinance number 19-35, an ordinance approving a conditional use permit for the Ohio Wesleyan Village student housing located at the northwest corner of Liberty Street and Park Avenue on approximately 3 acres zone POI Planned Office Institutional District. Ordinance number 19-36, an ordinance for Ohio Wesleyan University approving a combined preliminary and final development plan for Ohio Wesleyan Village student housing located at the northwest corner of Liberty Street and Park Avenue on approximately 3 acres zone POI Planned Office Institutional District. And ordinance number 19-37, an ordinance for approval of an alley vacation request by Ohio Wesleyan University of an alley for Ohio Wesleyan Village student housing located along the north side of Park Avenue just west of Liberty Street.
Madam Mayor, members of council, you set the public hearing for 2 of these earlier this evening. We'll present it at your next meeting.
Okay. Are you gonna do city manager's report?
I am, real quick. Earlier today, Councilman Hellinger asked me to get an estimate for what it cost our law enforcement for Drag 101. And currently Chief is finishing up those estimates, but it's between $7,000 and $8,000 is what it costs us.
I'm sorry, for what?
To do what?
For the Drag 101 security and
Oh.
investigation, things of that nature. And that does not include the cost of mutual aid. So we had Columbus and who else, Chief? I forgot.
Delaware County.
Oh, Delaware County, of course.
Columbus, Ohio Wesleyan, others lined up.
So between $7,000 and $8,000 for that event.
Did the shop owner request the security, or did we take it upon ourselves?
Chief?
The shop owner hired their own extra duty officer to have a security presence inside the store. That's where they're responsible. We don't have a responsibility. What our concern was all the people that were rallying outside. They're in a public area.
they knew they could be in a public area and rally for their cause. And it wasn't necessarily the event that concerned us, but the potential for counter protesters.
Sure.
So a lot of the consultation we did with the county, with the city of Columbus, and with the state kind of led us to believe, you know, we thought it was low risk, but if we didn't prepare for it and have something happen, that's a problem. So we had to, you know, we had a plan in place, we had resources in place. Fortunately, we didn't need anything, but it does cost.
And then finally, the only other thing I had is just a reminder that the new assistant city manager starts on Wednesday, Kyle Kreidler. So if he's in the office, or if you're in the office, excuse me, you know, just stop in and I'll make sure that you guys get another personal introduction. That's all I have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council comments? Mr. Jones?
I have none, Mayor.
Oh. Mrs. Keller?
I have none, thank you.
Mr. Browning?
I have a handout.
boy.
This was something that was passed out. Superintendent Kraft pulled together some tax numbers and students, and so another challenge that affordable housing, this kind of brings another perspective to it from there into things, so it's just good information. That's all I have, thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me?
Can I have a talk with you people about over there on East William Street?
Well, the time for that was earlier this evening when we asked for public comments.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's at the beginning of each meeting.
Okay.
So,
I'll wait till next meeting.
If you want to wait till after the meeting, I can just get with you and get your name real quick and
Pardon?
find out what your issue is.
I didn't know.
If you just want to wait after the meeting, I'll just get your name real quick and I'll give you a call tomorrow.
is it real lengthy? Come forward, let's just, you're here.
You're here?
Yes, come forward to the microphone and give us your name and address for the record, okay, ma'am?
My name is Helen Stone. I live at 255 East William Street, Delaware, Ohio. And it has nothing to do with your construction. It has to do with our alley. Our alley is not an alley, it is a street. We can't park on East William, we can't park on Channing because it is a school. And you've had police patrol there to keep people from blocking the alley so that we can get in and out of our homes. And I think that, and it is not being taken care of. I and John Ward, we go out in the wintertime and with my big snow blower and we clear that alley so people can get in and out and go to work. Plus the sidewalks. And I just thought, maybe you guys could help us. Can you plow our alley? Can you take care of the potholes in our alley to get back out on Channing Street?
Mr. Farina would be the one that would answer that question.
Yeah, I think,
We talked to you at
we
the school.
talked during the point
Mhm.
meeting, and we suggested, I think the complaint was, we do pothole maintenance and that, but we don't pave an alley. We had a long discussion about this alley being, it functions more as a road for these residents than just as an alley, as a secondary alternative access. And currently, we haven't paved alleys since, I think 1997, 96 is the last time we did an alley paving program. And we spoke about that, and I suggested that if you want your alley paved, you need to start with talking with your council representatives and council, because currently we don't pave alleys, we just take care of alley maintenance. So I think that was the request, not to put words in your mouth tonight, but you wanted higher level of maintenance on the alley than just taking care of holes on it, because the alley condition is very poor.
Well, like I said, that is not an alley, that is a street. That is our street.
Well, it's probably platted as an alley years and years and years ago.
Yeah,
You may
probably.
use it as a street because it looks like you don't have a driveway in the front of your house here. So,
All we have is our back door. That's how we go in and out of our house.
Do you have, Ms. Stone's phone number?
We can get it.
Okay. Mrs. Stone, make sure that Elaine has your phone number and somebody on staff will be in touch with you, okay?
I'll get you in a minute.
All right? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
I thank you for listening to
Sure.
me.
Sure.
I've been there for 43 years. And I remember the garbage people coming down that alley all the time.
No.
Just give us a helping hand, please. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You want my address?
Yes. I'll step out.
There, right?
Did I do council comments?
No, we
You did.
finished.
We're finished.
I will not be here on the 24th.
Okay.
Okay. Vacation, I hope?
I will be at my house watching for burglars, so just kidding.
Mr. Hillier?
Apparently you're not supposed to announce vacations
You're
on
really
Facebook.
not.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hillier?
Yeah, I have nothing.
Mr. Shea? Okay. I don't think I have anything either. So, can I have a motion to go into executive session?
I move to go into executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 121.22 G3, G1, G2, and G8.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Keller, a second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riddle?
Yes.
And I would like to request, Madam Mayor, that our city attorney keep this brief.
I can keep it super
Okay, let's
brief.
give them a couple minutes to get the microphones off and everybody out.